Hello, hello, hello. Hope you all having a good day today, wherever you are. As the title of my video says, I'm going to be reacting to this video here by CalliesCorner. Now, I only seen one of their videos that they did on their good and worst moments of the Avatar live action season 1 and comparing it to the original show. So I say this person has some good takes that I agreed on in that video because I watched it offline. And some of her takes about the show were good, and some of them I agreed with. And this video here is on Arcane, which is a show that I've seen. Now, I wasn't really, I would say I was a little hyped for it. I've been seeing it a lot on ads, and it kept being promoted on Netflix. So I said, let me give it a try. And I was very excited for it. I benched it. I saw the entire first part of Arcane, so I was excited for that. Every episode was gripping me on my seat with my popcorn in hand. I watched every episode, and then season 2 came around. I said, all right, this looks okay. Then the season came out, and I'm like, okay, I'm not enjoying it as much as season 1, but it could win me over. And at the end, I'm like, okay, they jumped the gun here. They did too much stuff because I'd assumed they were going to be doing more of the Zahn and Piltover plot line. Instead, they went and did some world-ending event type of scenario when they could have just continued the Zahn and Piltover stuff from the first season. But even though season 2 wasn't as good as season 1, I am still excited for whatever they do next. So I'll give that a try. So for this video here, I'm going to look at this video by this channel. And you want to see it, the original video is in the description of my video here. So let's get started. 3, 2, 1.
I'd like to tell you the story of an underdog that rose above the odds, looked down upon since its conception, bearing the scorn of labels like video game adaptation and official League of Legends Netflix show. With these...
Okay, yeah, I do remember, because I remembered I knew about League, and I was a little bit familiar with some of the lore, but from what I heard, people weren't really excited to see maybe how they're going to adapt a video game to a show. But I would say season 1 was very exceeded expectations and made that possible.
These preconceptions in mind, League fans were ready for Arcane to be a mindless spectacle, relying on the hype of its characters to cover up for poor storytelling, but it was a watershed success. It was a thrilling yet nuanced look at family issues, class struggles, mental illness, technology, a variety of interesting issues, all explored through an endearing cast of characters. This refreshingly mature story was delivered in gorgeous stylized computer animation that wasn't afraid to be unconventional in its presentation. It became one of my top shows of all time, as I'm sure it did for many of you. Arcane Season 1 ends on an infamously tragic cliffhanger. Essentially, schizophrenic punk launches nuke at a bunch of snobby rich people and cut to black. That left fans desperate for Season 2. The creative team pushed through the chaos of the pandemic to bring us the next season, and everyone's worst fears of of what a League of Legends official show would be like came to life. The intricately planned and nuanced narrative was replaced with the rushed story that put characters through the most dramatic beats possible with little rhyme or reason. Without the engaging writing to support it, the animation lost its emotional weight and tended towards self-indulgent spectacle. At least, that's what happened in my perspective. Listen, I wasn't even this much of a buzzkill at first. Season 2's presentation is effective enough that I was able to enjoy most of it my first watch. But you know when you finish a show and it hurts? Sometimes it's a good hurt, a post-show depression that this fun adventure has come to an end. Like how I felt watching Avatar: The Last Airbender for the first time. Sometimes it's not, a vague feeling of dissatisfaction that it just didn't turn out to be as good as you hoped. Like how I felt watching The Promised Neverland for the first time. By the time Season 2 was finished, I realized I'd been riding on my goodwill towards the creators from Season 1 for most of my watch, only to conclude that maybe I shouldn't have let them cook. So after watching Arcane in one sitting and taking notes like an insane person, I think I can finally put my general disappointment into words. Hopefully this can be a cathartic experience for people who also felt vaguely angry about Season 2, and for my Season 2 fans, you'll just stop existing by the time this video is done because my big brain arguments will explode your little snowflake minds, and Christian, Alex, Amanda, and Ola Fortiche will never be allowed to work in this industry again. Sorry, that was just me being a little silly. Really, I only want to share my perspective and yap about a show that hasn't left my mind for like 3 years. I'd be happy if you can still enjoy Season 2 for what it's worth. So, are we friends? Aw, get over here, you. Alright.
Make it a habit. 7 minutes of Tai Chi every morning, all the way for.
Enough of that mushy talk. Let's begin the autopsy. Arcane has a very dense narrative with lots of intersecting parts, so I'd like to start with the straightforward summary of what happens for those who need a refresher or have never watched the show and are just here for the drama. There won't be any analysis happening in this segment, so if this show is burned into your brain like it is mine, feel free to skip ahead. Season 1 is divided into 3 episode segments known as acts. Each one is like a mini narrative arc with a distinct beginning, middle, and end that connects to the show's overarching story. Got it? Good. Time to crank it. Episode 1 opens by dropping us into the aftermath.
I don't really know what it's about.
I grew up knowing I'm less than them. That my place is down there. I want Powder to have more than that, and I'm willing to fight for it.
When you imagine the protagonist for a show about ragtag rebels with cool powers fighting against an oppressive government, you imagine someone like Vi. She's a punch first and ask questions later brawler. We often watch protagonists like her bite off a little more than they can chew in their effort to fight for justice, but ultimately, they learn how to be a leader that inspires change. Maybe they even form a found family dynamic with some fellow orphans, or witness the death of a mentor figure, which gives them the final push needed to become a stronger version of themselves. The Arcane writers took a look at that and said, well, that sounds boring. Into the trauma washing machine you go. What makes Vi a fresh and interesting iteration on this archetype is that when we first meet her, she seems unstoppable, like she's already completed all the tests of courage on the hero's journey. She never shies away from a challenge, accomplishes what she sets her mind to, and she has the physical strength to back up her confidence. Throughout the opening heists, she acts as the ultimate authority, and the other kids follow her easily because she's earned their respect through her actions. Vi appears to be an effective leader, but it's through the failure of the heist and her following conversation with Vander that the writers begin deconstructing the issues behind Vi's style of leadership. The best way to summarize it is by paraphrasing what Vander says during this scene. When you're a leader, you don't get to be selfish. Vi isn't being purposefully selfish. Her intentions come from a noble place of fighting back against the unjust leadership of Piltover to provide a better life for her family. But what does creating a better life for her family actually look like? If the heist was successful, Vi would have been able to provide her family with plenty of cash to live comfortably and maybe satisfy her own sense of pride and need to rebel. The question is whether this reward was worth the risk of failure, with the kids now in danger of being arrested, a question she should have given real thought to before she charged onto the battlefield. In the initial conversation after the heist, and even all of the private conversations following that, Vander offers Vi a different perspective on leadership and resistance. He nurtures the best qualities in others so that everyone can be a capable leader in their own way, and he only steps in when someone can't handle a situation on their own. own. This is effectively established in one of his first scenes. Huck's role as the bartender allows him to use his skills to provide for himself, but when the corrupt traders try to cheat him out of his money, Vander steps in to help lay down the law. He doesn't even need to use his own physical strength to subdue the traders because the whole bar stands up for their boy Huck. Vander relies on the strength provided by this tight-knit community so that he doesn't have to use his strength to solve every problem. Vi's impulsiveness and arrogance prevents her from doing this. This leadership style feels passive to her, and it prevents her from being in control, something that she just can't accept. She needs to be the protective big sister that shoulders everyone's burdens. I'm not a therapist or anything, but it feels a little bit toxic. The issue with her always trying to be the strong one is that something will eventually happen to break Vi, and she'll leave all of the people who have grown dependent on her adrift. Powder, what are you doing here? It's by the end of episode 2 that Vi's major flaws begin to rear their heads: her need to feel in control and her impulsiveness. Vi and Vander's conversation on the bridge captures everything I love about their relationship. This kind of grizzled father figure with a violent past and rebellious, fiery teen dynamic is pretty popular nowadays, but it's portrayed so true to life with Vi and Vander. You can feel that in spite of their grim circumstances and conflicting perspectives, they care about each other enough to be honest about these difficult truths. Vander sees Vi heading down the same path he once did and is trying to do everything he can to convince her to get off. But honestly, he's better off telling this to a brick wall, and Vi still refuses to learn from her mistakes. In all seriousness, her choice to turn herself in so that the enforcers will back off is an interesting turn for her character. She's not simply letting out her anger at those who have wronged her. Her actions come out of a mix of love for her family and her home, as well as a fear that she can't keep waiting around for the storm to blow over. At the same time, she has to know Vander would never let this happen, and once again, her desire to act without thinking and stubborn need to solve things on her own proves to be her undoing. It forces Vander to make a quick decision and gives Silco the opportunity he was waiting for. The unraveling of events in episode 3 is very revealing for Vi's character. We can tell she's afraid, that she knows she's messed things up for real this time, but she's desperate to put on a brave face, to convince herself and everyone else that she will be able to make it right. When she feels like she's losing control, she becomes dangerously impulsive. Remember what I said about her encouraging a toxic sense of dependency in others? Powder, can you not have a mental breakdown so loudly? I'm trying to record a video. While the fight between Vi and Powder after Vander's death is the most infamous moment between them, I think Vi telling Powder to stay behind and her subsequent breakdown is the true moment any trust between them was lost. In some ways, Vi's encouragement of Powder was her filling her role as a big sister, and she was right to tell Powder to embrace her unique talents so that she could be strong in her own way. At the same time, this made Powder dependent on Vi's love and approval to fight off her insecurities. It's the difference between I believe in myself and that's all that matters, and Vi believes in me and that's all that matters. So when this illusion gets horribly shattered and Vi is forced to admit that she doesn't believe Powder is ready, it cracks the already fragile mental state of this young girl, who's now been left alone by the one person she thought believed in her, watching helplessly as everyone she loves seemingly marches to their deaths. In a tragically ironic way, Vi would have successfully rescued Vander if Powder had stayed behind, but in neglecting Powder's emotional needs and unintentionally sending her into a spiral, Vi contributes to the ensuing disaster. Through watching her family members die in the most horrible ways imaginable, Vi reaches that breaking point I warned about earlier, and when she has the chance to protect Powder and get the two of them to safety, she isn't able to.
Hey,
She lets her rage take control, acting with her fists instead of her heart, and she confirms all of Powder's worst beliefs about herself. Even though Vi shows some restraint and leaves to cool off, those words have changed their relationship forever. Now this is where we start talking about Vi's character arc as it relates to her relationship with Powder/Jinx, and this is where I might say some harsh things about people's favorite comfort characters and everyone starts screaming, crying, throwing up in the comments. Please remember that Vi and Jinx's relationship is written to be contentious. The writers acknowledge that both of these girls are very flawed, and you can criticize both while still empathizing with both. Passing moral judgments on these characters isn't the goal of my analysis anyway. When I say Vi did this thing that was bad, I'm trying to point out a character flaw that the writers are exploring, not saying Vi did this thing that was bad and I hate her! When it comes to Vi and Jinx's reunion, as well as her reunion with Echo, her inability to let go of Powder isn't just wishful thinking. A part of it comes from her fear of acknowledging the part she played in creating Jinx, a fear of being helpless to do anything to fix this problem in front of her. Vi is the leader, the one who's always in control. In her internal logic, she's the only one strong enough to protect her sister and bring back Powder. So if there's no Powder left, she has to accept her failure, and the existence of Jinx rests on her shoulders. There's a subtle distinction between accepting responsibility for the hurt she's caused and making herself feel directly responsible for Jinx's decisions. But
okay, got some good analysis there. I do agree with it. some of the stuff there with Vi in season 1 is accurate. With her slowly taking the blame of what happened to Powder, turning to Jinx, because then she kind of accepted that at the end of the season finale, with Powder saying, "Oh, Vander and Soko didn't make Jinx; she did because she abandoned her." And their reunion was bittersweet because we kind of assumed, like, all right, they're united again. How are they gonna wrap this up? Hello there. So's 6598. How's your day been? So anyway, what was I saying? So overall, I do believe, yeah, season 1, Vi has some good character moments so far. From what she said, about Vi, I do agree with. So let's see what else she has to say.
But the writers explore it so well through Vi. In the end, Vi's insistence on being the protector only hurts them both. It contributes to Powder's inability to achieve independence and break free of the Jinx persona, as well as prevents Vi from accepting that she can't simply change Jinx back through her own efforts. This is best demonstrated in the ultimatum Jinx presents Vi with during their final confrontation. If she kills Caitlyn, thus correcting her second betrayal as Jinx perceives it, she can have Powder back. Part of this is coming from Jinx's intense paranoia and distrust, but it also reflects her toxic sense of dependency on Vi. Vi isn't able to heal from what has happened by finding meaning in new relationships, and Caitlyn gets put in the middle of a conflict she played no real part in. More concerningly, when Jinx points her gun on Caitlyn, Vi offers to run away with Jinx, just the two of them forever. Vi is so desperate to fix the problem of Jinx that she stifles her own life, and she mistakenly believes that if she's there to protect her, all of Jinx's issues will magically disappear. This causes Jinx to give into her fear that Vi will find something she doesn't like about her and betray her all over again, destroying the rocky ground that their relationship stood on. As I said, not a therapist, but this is like toxic codependency or something. But in a way, can you blame Vi? She had to learn Vander's lesson that her fist can't solve all her problems in the hardest way possible. How could she not fight with her whole life to make amends and get her little sister back? Someone who was basically her whole world. Man, now I'm just sad. Vi is a surprisingly tragic exploration of what it would be like to grow up in a young adult dystopian story. The pain that you would have to carry if you lived the life of a heroic rebel leading a bunch of misfit kids against an authoritarian regime. Even in a more relatable sense, I know people with Vi's same stubborn protectiveness who need to jump in and do something whenever they sense someone has been wronged, regardless of whether or not they end up hurting others or themselves. And they almost enjoy taking on other people's problems, shouldering their pain in this weird mix of self-punishment and a need to be useful. Some people call it love, I call it stupid. Even so, I was surprised at how engaged I was with Vi's journey. She seemed archetypical at first, but the writers do such a careful deconstruction of her sometimes misguided need to take action, the dichotomy between the strength she projects and the burdens she carries. All the while, she's still fun and inspiring to watch as the protagonist of a fairly bleak story. Her last fight with Savika comes to mind. I love it a lot. It's second to the Echo and Jinx fight for me. It's very well choreographed and it captures the strength of Vi, in spite of all of her flaws, perfectly. After taking a beating from Savika, Vi sees a hallucination of Vander. He shares his usual advice, telling her the fight never gets easier, but there's people that need her, and she has to keep going for them. Vi gets back up, she faces down Savika, and for once, she tries something new. She blocks. Ultimately, it's the move that wins her the fight. Vi may be held back by her need to get even.
Okay, that is a good fighting style, because I remember in season 1, Vi always fist first, talk later. So it was a very good use of the gloves for her. Instead of trying to punch, she managed to block this time, and in that case, learning that the gloves had a new ability to use that shield maneuver in order to make it a win the fight. So yep, I agree with that one. That's a good assessment of Vi in that scene.
even and her tendency to act without thinking, but when she learns to let go of her pride and defend those she loves rather than let out her anger on others, she becomes the strongest version of herself.
Like everything was the same as when Vander left him. But he didn't make Jinx. You did.
I learned that ChatGPT works best with detailed prompts, but I hate typing them. So instead, I
The best way to describe Powder/Jinx as a character is a balancing act, and the writers walk it flawlessly in Season 1. It's still crazy to me that one of the most mature depictions of the traumatized killer archetype comes from the official League of Legends Netflix show. It's refreshing that Arcane depicts how Jinx's mental struggles manifest in her violence and paranoia in a way that isn't sanitized or exploitative. You can believe that she's capable of committing unspeakable acts while still wanting her to find healing and become a new person. She inspires fear and empathy at the same time. Part of the reason that the writers are able to pull off such a dramatic character change from Powder to Jinx is that they effectively communicate how much this girl is hurting, even without words. This moment during the street brawl of episode 1 has stayed with me since I first rewatched the show weeks ago, where the action slows down and the music becomes solemn as we focus on Powder's shell-shocked expression, frozen in fear as the fight unfolds in front of her. It's portrayed so effectively that it feels like you're forming a traumatic memory alongside her. As I discussed in the previous section, kids like Vi can push back harder when the world pushes down on them, but kids like Powder simply get left behind. When the world is cruel, people just don't have the capacity to care for others, and Powder's feelings of helplessness and neglect only continue to eat away at her as a result of this. You can understand how this sort of environment would cause Powder to live in constant fear and self-doubt, knowing she doesn't have the physical strength or confidence of someone like Vi. In some respects, Milo has a point when he argues that Powder is a burden to the group, although he's certainly wrong to imply that she's less valuable as a person because of this. Still, growing up in a place like Zaun means the odds are stacked against Powder, and she doesn't get the chance to grow into her own uniquely talented person. It contributes to her unhealthy idolization of Vi, to the point that her self-worth isn't placed in who she is, but what Vi thinks of her. This mindset explains Powder's seemingly out of nowhere mental breakdown after Vi leaves her to rescue Vander.
Okay, I agree with that one. Given in Season 1, at least in the first episode, Powder/Jinx, oh, I guess Powder in this case, she was the one that I was most interested in learning more about. Given it looked like Vi already had her character progression, and the other characters weren't really developed as much, so Powder was the one, besides Vi, like of the most development in at least the first few episodes before the time skip. Yes, I agree with that moment because yes, Powder wanted to help, and Vi didn't want her to help because she assumed if her talk with Vander, she wanted to keep Powder safe, and with her leaving Powder, that made Powder think that she wasn't useful to the group. And that's when she got her little breakdown moment in that one scene in the room.
A part of this hints at her fragile mental state that will only become more anxious in the latter half of the show, but this isn't just fear for the safety of her family. Such an intense response indicates that her sense of identity has been shattered now that the one thing she thought was constant, Vi's belief in her, has disappeared. It's also telling that the thing that snaps her out of her breakdown is when she finds the crystal and gets the idea to make a supercharged version of her monkey bomb. In her mind, this will prove Milo wrong, will earn her place in her family, and will make Vi proud of her again. It makes Powder's excitement when she finds Vi after the explosion all the more heartbreaking. She believes that she's finally become the hero, only to find out she's become everything she always hated about herself. A lot of stories get this helpless child archetype wrong in that they don't feel like their own person, and instead are used to manufacture sympathy from the audience. This moment could easily feel like contrived drama and annoying to the audience. Am I heartless for saying that? Listen, I'm not saying I didn't feel bad when Powder started crying, but Vi told you to stay home. So why didn't you stay home? The thing is...
Yeah, that is a given. Because look at it. If Powder stayed home, because we saw at the end of the episode, like, yep, the big chubby guy, he was bringing on the wall, he had the wall open, the wall was all gone, So all I had to do is, and Vander was free, so all I had to do after that was just go to the door. So if Powder wasn't there, they probably would have escaped alive. Well, I guess for plot reasons, that couldn't happen, so they had to be all killed off at that one episode.
Is, as I so eloquently described earlier, Powder as an individual and as Vi's little sister is so well characterized that we understand and empathize with why she wouldn't listen to Vi's better judgment. It gives her tears an impact because we see how the writers are playing out the internal battle of her character that they've developed over the previous 2 episodes, rather than pointlessly traumatizing a child just to make us cry. It's the difference between taking us on the life journey of an owner and their dog to the heartbreaking end of the animal's life and just shooting a puppy on screen. The visual presentation of this moment also helps tremendously in making this horrifying to watch. Seriously, can someone make sure Mia Janess is okay?
Filming that specific scene in episode 3 was, I was 11.
Even though the change from Powder to Jinx is dramatic, in a way you almost expect.
Wait, don't. So I wanted she did like a great performance. I'm like, okay, who? I always wondered who voiced young Powder in that scene, because that emotion of her yelling Vi's name when she left, with Vander behind her. Yep, that was a good that scene there. I'm like, man, this actress is fantastic, and she was 11. That's range.
Expect a persona like Jinx to form as a result of Vi's betrayal, because the writers have so effectively communicated Powder's psychology. Jinx's introduction in episode 4 establishes the careful balance of vengefulness and vulnerability that defines her character. Her action scenes are well coordinated and exhilarating, but they're in no way fun to watch. Her violence has a quirkiness to it that we expect from Powder, but this dissonance between childlike playfulness and carnage makes the brutality of it all the more unsettling. Jinx's detached apathy only worsens this feeling. It doesn't seem like she has any pride or satisfaction in what she does, if she's even fully present mentally. The frantic violin music in this scene certainly adds to the Homelander vibes. Despite this, the writers communicate an underlying sense of fear and brokenness to Jinx that makes us believe in her humanity. By ending the fight with her hallucinations of Vi, we understand how haunted Jinx is by what happened between them. It creates natural empathy from the audience, and it clearly communicates the internal war going on inside Jinx, a desire to restore her relationship with her sister, fighting against a lingering resentment and fear that causes her to hold on to Jinx as a coping mechanism. The Jinx identity is extremely multifaceted, going far beyond the manic pixie murderer archetype. Even though she can experience intense mood swings from scene to scene, there's a method to her madness. Jinx serves to protect Powder's innocence by being the source of everything Powder hates about herself. Jinx is the one that causes destruction and hurts the one she loves. It provides a degree of separation from her actions so that she doesn't have to deal with the guilt that weighs on her. At the same time, Jinx is a result of how others have treated Powder. She lets Powder feel strong and in control, unleashing all of the pain that Vi inflicted onto her back onto the world. Vi's betrayal served as the catalyst for this destructive vengeance, and Silco only encouraged this aspect of Powder as she grew into Jinx. She's a storm of emotions in every scene, but the creative visual storytelling and effective dialogue allows us to follow her internal logic so that she never seems inconsistent. Throughout Acts 2 and 3, Jinx is often at the mercy of the 2 biggest influences in her life, Vi and Silco. While Vi's approach to repairing her relationship with Jinx has its flaws, as I discussed earlier, in some ways, she represents healing and growth for Jinx. She offers unconditional forgiveness towards her, a chance to wipe the slate clean and return to who she was before, as if nothing changed. On the other hand, Silco encourages Jinx's paranoia, to embrace her destructive strength and show no mercy to those who have wronged her. In a twisted parallel to Vander, Silco doesn't teach Jinx to learn from his mistakes, but rather projects his own cruel, vengeful worldview onto her. Both of these influences constrain her in their own ways. Vi's inability to confront reality and accept how her sister has been forever changed by what happened between them leaves Jinx feeling misunderstood and unloved. Vi wants Powder to come back, but any thought of the past triggers Jinx. Powder fell down a well, as Jinx says, and she knows that she can never bring her back, so she feels as if she's disappointed Vi once again. This is why when Vi tries to remind Jinx of their family during the final confrontation, it backfires on her and only makes Jinx less willing to trust that they can be together. Silco's influence on Jinx becomes stronger as a result of this. He plays plays to her distrust and fear of betrayal, convincing Jinx that she should excise her self-doubt and unleash her anger on the people who have hurt her, just like he did. He's protecting the vulnerable version of himself that felt betrayed by Vander in a way. It's why, even after sacrificing anyone and anything for his cause, he can't give up Jinx in exchange for Zahn. In the end, Jinx's choice to sit in the Jinx chair and unleash the rocket on the council reflects her choice to pursue a path similar to Silco. She isn't able to break free of Powder, Jinx, or any of the other perceptions she has of herself that cause her to live in paranoia and self-hatred. She embraces the release of her pain as indiscriminate destruction. Even as we watch the final moments of Act 3, the writers manage to pull off this birth of a monster moment in a way that is more heartbreaking than terrifying. Jinx laments that Vi can't love her the way she used to, and that they've both changed. In some ways, Jinx is right. By demonstrating how she was treated as a mistake by the people around her and the environment she grew up in, the writers make it easy to empathize with her struggles and want to see her heal. At the same time, Jinx's increased mistrust and fear of vulnerability only pushes her into a darker place. By the end of Season 1, she becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, a force of unmitigated destruction and revenge. Still, Jinx is so carefully and respectfully portrayed that even if it seems that hope is lost for now, you leave Season 1 wanting to believe that maybe it won't be lost forever.
What I can say is
Okay, yep, I agree with that one. Given their Season 1, their relationship is complex. Vi was in prison for a while, got out, found Jinx / Powder again, they united, and we assumed okay, that's a good nice animation there. Hope it goes well in learning how to do it. Okay, what was I saying? Yeah. So Vi and Jinx have a complex relationship. We assumed, all right, maybe they could get back together. Maybe they won't get back together. Like I assumed, all right, in the finale, you have to make a choice. Either Jinx is going to go back to being Powder again, or she's going to embrace her Jinx persona that she made for herself. And then at the end, she chooses to be Jinx and blows up the Piltover console room. So, all right, that's a good way to end it. Now let's see how they're going to continue Season 2 with this plot point, because I assumed in Season 2 that Jinx would have maybe, given that she killed Soko, so I thought she was going to take Soko's role and be the new crime boss of Zahn. She's going to be the new crime boss of Zahn, with all the people of Zahn rallying around her, because she's more like a symbol now, because she took out Piltover's seat of power, and all the Zahnites were going to follow her. So she would have been the new kingpin of Zahn, but nope, went a completely different direction in Season 2.
is she still needs you. They all do. So what do you say?
Vander earns his spot as one of the best mentor figures in fiction, maybe behind Uncle Iroh.
It's time to leave! Where are you? Uncle Iroh!
Over here.
Uncle?
Part of that is because he's an incredibly likable character who has great screen presence and feels like a real-life dad. But it's not as simple as that. Let's not forget that his first scene in the show was him bashing a guy's face in. Just another point of comparison between him and Uncle Iroh. His opening scene is actually an effective demonstration of what makes him more interesting than just the mentor character. Vander is a physically intimidating presence, someone who is capable of severe violence, and yet in this introductory scene, it's communicated to us without words how facing the consequences of this violence is what causes him to put down the gauntlets. Even with his limited screen time, Vander feels real. I wish he was real. Despite the gentle care he shows towards his kids, we get just enough glimpses to hint that there's so much more going on beneath the surface. You know the dad lore goes crazy for Vander. Where lesser shows with weaker mentor figures fail at this concept, Vander's strong characterization makes us invested in him as an individual, rather than simply because Vi cares about him. Having his arc parallel Vi's journey on so many levels allows us to understand his character, her character, and the show's themes much better. As a former revolutionary for the cause of Zon, Vander had to learn about the sacrifice violent resistance requires the hard way, and he is clearly trying to lead Vi onto a different path. His tireless effort to protect the people of the Undercity and his family makes it easy to admire him in the way that Vi does. I appreciate how Arcane conveys that pacifism doesn't mean passivity, and the show gives you a genuine reason to believe that Vander's method of fostering community between the members of the Undercity, as well as forming trustworthy relationships with influential topsiders like Grayson, can bring positive change for Zon. Even so, the show adds another layer to Vander's character by acknowledging the vulnerable position his approach puts him in, and the frustration from exploited Zonites who want more immediate, tangible results. It's not surprising that when Vander is asked to turn in his kids to get the enforcers off of the Undercity's back, he tries every alternative. And it's not just because they're his kids. He clearly lives by the principle that no one's life is expendable, something he committed himself to after seeing the results of his failed uprising firsthand. At the same time, you can understand why some would see this moral viewpoint as wishful thinking. After we watch the enforcers run around the Undercity assaulting people without cause, Savika's confrontation with Vander at the last drop serves as a warning of the impending bridge he will have to cross. Will he be able to maintain his principles under mounting pressure from the Undercity and topside, or will he decide to sacrifice one for the sake of the many? Vander begins to crack under the weight of maintaining peaceful relations between an unreasonable government and an increasingly frustrated, disaffected group of people, as well as caring for his children, who are trapped in the center of this mess. While in some ways, Vander has learned the lessons Vi needs to, he ends up sharing some of her flaws that lead to his eventual downfall, particularly his need to shoulder the burdens of others and his tendency towards aggression. This is captured by his transformation into a shimmer monster near the end of his fight with Silco. It's an incredibly effective end for his character. Vander's superpowered form isn't the heroic rescue we're used to seeing from him, or from any strong mentor figure for that matter, and that in itself makes this scene all the more unsettling. Vi's fearful expression and Silco's comment that he knew Vander had it in him only adds to this feeling. His tragic end is genuinely gutting in the way it should be for an effective mentor and an effective character in general. It seems like a pretty cynical message from the writers, the end result of a man who tried to take the high road only to be violently crushed by a cruel, unprincipled world that didn't play by his rules, forced to atone for the violence he perpetrated years ago. At the same time, it's important to acknowledge that Vander died doing what he always set out to do: protect his family. A final victory that admittedly feels pretty hollow in light of the loss of his family, of what he sacrificed everything for. Vander is a simultaneously inspiring and tragic character. It's impressive how layered he feels despite only being in the show for Act 1, and the writer's willingness to portray his flaws alongside his admirable qualities makes him so much more than the mentor character. It's the internal war inside Vander, his capability for violence and rage contrasted with his restraint and gentleness, that makes his journey compelling to watch. He's a thoughtful and grounded examination of what it means to protect the powerless in a world that is increasingly selfish and distrustful, and how even the influential figures in our lives that we idolize as kids can be just as flawed and vulnerable as we are.
The only way to defeat a super...
Okay. I agree with that. Vander was, for as much time as he had in the first part of season 1, he was a good mentor figure. For Vi, anyway. So he is up there with other mentors. I do enjoy, yeah. He does have that Uncle Iroh type of vibe in terms of mentorship. He's not as fun, where he has wise words of Vi. And he has experience, so he knows what he's doing. Like he's a reluctant hero. And yeah, okay. Now they're doing Soko. Yup, Soko. Top villain. Even in season, no. He was one of my favorite villains in Arcane. You know, there wasn't that many villains beside Mbessa. Soko was one of the best written villains in Arcane that I enjoyed. I enjoyed his presence in each scene he was in. Like, besides him, and Bessa would be my second favorite in this show.
Superior enemy is to stop at nothing, to become what they fear.
I'm gonna level with you guys for a moment. I have been staring at my laptop screen for a good few minutes, my Bang Dream playlist blasting in the background, trying to find a better way to say this. But I really think the best way to describe Silco is that he's the model of a Sigma male. He's one of the rare examples of a cold, calculating, skinny white guy villain with a bit of a dramatic flair that I find genuinely intimidating. Despite being arguably the most villainous character of Arcane, the writers develop his psychology so carefully that he stays interesting to watch and continues to surprise you up until the end of the show. Silco is a natural foil to Vander, and his worldview is best conveyed in his iconic drowning monologue. Whatever deals he has to make, whatever pain he has to inflict, whatever the sacrifice, he will never give up the fight for Zaun's independence and retribution against Piltover. Even with how ruthlessly he pursues this goal, you can still believe that he and Vander used to fight alongside one another, because interestingly enough, Silco doesn't seem to take much pleasure in the violence he causes. Okay, he has a little bit of fun with it sometimes. Like I said, dramatic flair.
You have to get out. Now.
Welcome.
This natural healing handbook is incredible, but I thought it was a little pricey
damn
at
it.
first, since a lot of people said they were waiting for a better.
But notably, there's a sense that he views himself as morally superior to the Chem Barons. Their brand of violence, which is only a power grab to make themselves richer, is detestable to Silco. Even more interesting is the fact that during his initial conversation with Vander after kidnapping him, Silco is genuinely hurt by Vander's insinuation that he's only continued his fight in the way that he has to protect his ego. In Silco's mind, his actions are a necessary response to the increasing oppression from Piltover, the base violence necessary for change, as he puts it. He doesn't want war. In a way, he wants Zaun to flourish just like Vander does. But when Vander put down his gauntlets and refused to let any more innocent lives be sacrificed, Silco saw it as his weakness, his inability to confront reality and fight for control. Silco explains to Vander in this conversation that his hatred towards him isn't simply because Vander snapped and tried to drown him. If anything, Silco thought that was pretty metal and respected that he had the guts to do something that he viewed as difficult but necessary. Silco hated Vander once he started cutting deals with enforcers and, in his view, refused to take any action against Piltover. Although Silco's perspective isn't completely accurate, considering that Vander was working tirelessly to build a tight-knit community that would further the growth of Zaun, you can empathize with his rationale and understand how someone like him, who lived his whole life powerless to the whims of a controlling government, would be willing to do anything in order to get some of that control back. At the same time, for as Sigma as he acts, Silco isn't perfectly rational. As I said, his obsession with control and his bitterness towards the other side has caused him to lose any sense of justice that would have inspired Vander to fight alongside him in the first place. He isn't able to form any true alliances with others, simply manipulating people's fear and greed to ultimately accomplish his goals. While he's not blindly power hungry, there's a sense that he's got something to prove and is driven by a desire for vengeance. His relationship with Jinx is what brings this out most. The subtle way the writers explore Silco's transformation as a result of caring for Jinx keeps his character interesting once Vander is out of the picture, and they stick the landing on something that could easily feel ham-fisted. Admittedly, it took me until the end of my first watch to accept that Silco loved Jinx beyond her usefulness to him as a human weapon, and it was one of those things where rewatching a show enhanced my investment in its characters.
Okay, that's a good point there. Yes, since after Vander died, Jinx was the only reason why we got some more scenes with him, so yes, I agree at that point there. Given the first season of Arcane, you saw the progression of their bond. I mean, there was a sick and twisted one. In a way, he kind of sort of did consider Powder as a daughter, which I believe, given when he died, I do believe yes. I do believe he wouldn't have given Jinx over to Piltover, because he said as much. Like, Vander betrays me, Vi betrayed you, it's only you and me, we can't trust anybody else. And then when he died, he just told her, "Yup, I wouldn't have given you over to them, not for anything." So yeah, I do believe, yep, he kind of did love Powder / Jinx in a way. So I do think he was true in that way. He wasn't going to give her up.
I think I was just hung up on the fact that his version of fatherly love means encouraging his daughter to embrace her pain and bitterness to become vengeance incarnate. But hey, I'm not a parent. I don't have any room to judge. Similar to how Vi and Vander are connected by their shared struggle to protect those they care about, Jinx and Silco have a strange bond founded on the fact that they were both betrayed and treated like monsters by the people they admired most. Silco even gets his own scenes where he mentors Jinx like Vander does for Vi. And the scene where he takes her to the river that Vander drowned him in effectively captures their dynamic. Silco empathizes with Jinx's pain. In her, he sees a more vulnerable version of himself, the past version of him that struggled to process Vander's betrayal, that felt lost and confused without his support. He projects this internal struggle onto her, and it seems very cathartic for him to guide her down this path towards expelling her doubts and becoming the strongest version of herself. Maybe Silco's more hurt by Vander's betrayal than he'd like to admit, and his nurturing of Jinx's bitterness and destructiveness is his way of coping. Ultimately, the part he plays in creating Jinx proves to be his undoing on multiple levels. Despite Silco's persistent ruthlessness and how he advances the mission of Zaun, you can see him following a similar path to Vander. He just can't sacrifice Jinx, no matter how many opportunities arise where it would be more advantageous to Zaun to do so. It seems he wants her to prove her worth to everyone who doubts her, just as he did in accomplishing his dream of Zaun. When Vi returns as an influence in Jinx's life and almost succeeds in turning her against Silco, it reveals how irrationally protective he is of her. All of his investment in Jinx's growth into a ruthless killer is nearly swept out from under him, and Vi's similarities to Vander only make the issue more personal. Looking back, it's almost unsurprising that when offered the nation of Zaun in exchange for Jinx, Silco couldn't accept the deal. Jinx was the first person he truly cared about outside of his own aspirations, and he finally knew why Vander found this to be more valuable than their cause. But in the end, there's something selfish about the way Silco loved Jinx. I mean, this man couldn't show unconditional love to another person unless they literally had the same life story as him. Silco wanted Jinx to become him, and in a way, she did. He carefully guided her down a path of pain, vengeance, and distrust, until one day, her destructiveness grew out of his control. She unleashed her anger on the Council, destroying their one chance at independence for Zaun, and she unleashed it on him. By the end, Jinx is Silco's bitterness incarnate, and his death demonstrates how his own cynical worldview destroyed everything he cared about.
Piltover.
Most people over 40 will enter 2026 still using ChatGPT like Google. Don't be one of them. Watch this instead.
The land of progress, equality, innovation. I know it sounds impossible, but...
Okay, for Jace, I wasn't really that invested in Jace's character in season 1. Given one, when I watched Arcane, I wasn't really familiar with the lore that much. I only got into lore a little bit after season 1. I started doing some research on each of the characters. Then I looked and said, okay, they're changing. From what I understand, how they did Jace in Arcane is a much better version of how he is in the lore. Actually, when they come to Victor is when they have a problem, because they went a whole different route, from what I assume. From what I researched about Victor. Because out of the Dree, Mel, Jace, Victor, and Mel, I would say I was more interested in the Mel and Victor part. I was more interested in the Mel part of season 1, given her dynamic with her mother, with Mbessa.
But when have we ever let that stop us?
With Vi being our main protagonist for the Undercity plotline of Season 1, we follow Jace for the Topside plotline, and similar to Vi, Jace is an interesting iteration on an archetypical protagonist. He checks the boxes for the aspiring young inventor trope, a good-hearted individual who dares to dream of a better world. Through a mix of determination and fortune, he makes a groundbreaking discovery, something that could be the key to a brighter future for all. Unfortunately, the world is fearful and closed-minded when it comes to those who push the boundaries, but Jace maintains his hope in spite of it all. He puts everything on the line, eventually making the breakthrough needed to prove all of the naysayers wrong and learning that maybe the real science was the friends we made along the way. Sounds stupid. Surprise, we're actually going to follow a naive young man's gradual transformation into a political creature as he loses himself in the pursuit of power, admiration, and progress at all costs. And you might be surprised if I told you that even at the end of it all, you still root for his eventual return to who he was and his restoration of the ideals he originally fought for. It's thanks to the writer's thoughtful and painfully realistic depiction of Jace's misguided attempts to be a virtuous leader that you can empathize with his journey throughout, no matter how frustrating he can be at times. Jace arguably isn't changed that much by his increased influence throughout Season 1. It's more so that this power amplifies his flaws, giving any of his errors and judgments a ripple effect that impacts thousands of innocent lives. Even as the man of progress, and eventually a counselor, Jace still stands for similar ideals. Progress, fairness, love and justice, if you will, but we watch as, gradually in Act 2 and then pretty frantically in Act 3, he compromises on these principles in order to appease whatever current influential person in his life has his attention. When Jace first becomes a counselor, he puts his power to good use, starting investigations into corrupt trading practices within Piltover's government. But this slows down his progress on Hextech, leaving Victor to handle all the work by himself. So when Mel explains to Jace that the good and noble counselors are the ones perpetrating all this illegal commerce, he quickly backtracks on his effort to promote accountability in government and starts cutting deals to secure support for Hextech as well as protect his own position. But in trying to solve one problem, Jace has created a whole other one for himself. Now he's forced to serve the whims of corrupt counselors to the point that he seems completely uninterested in his and Victor's original objective of using Hextech to improve the lives of people in need. But when his, let's say, obsession with the council prevents him from protecting Victor, he's suddenly all about pushing Hextech forward at all costs and pays no mind to Heimerdinger's warnings, the mentor he once revered. Jace is consistently inconsistent, yet his internal logic is communicated clearly enough that the audience feels like they're on the same page as the writers, which keeps them engaged with his journey. He's ruled by his desires, if you know what I mean. He ignores Heimerdinger's wisdom, but how else will he improve the world with Hextech and especially save Victor's life? He tries to win favor with the council and with Mel, but how else will he further Hextech or enact change in the situation between Piltover and Zahn? A key characteristic of Jace is how easily influenced he can be. He's not an egomaniac, but he likes to be told he's a good boy and given a hug sometimes. Listen, being a people pleaser is fine, it just becomes a little problematic when it starts influencing your policy decisions. If Mel wants him on the council or Victor wants him to start experimenting on the Hex score, he will as long as they ask nicely. The writers do a great job of providing transitory scenes that demonstrate how an influential person in Jace's life, like Mel, Victor, or Heimerdinger, facilitates a natural change from him standing up for one belief at the beginning of the episode to going against it by the end of the episode. This is demonstrated as early as his first scenes in episode 2, where the writers show how Heimerdinger influences Jace to hide the true nature of his research from the council, only to show how Mel embarrasses him during the trial to successfully manipulate him into defending the value of his work and ignoring Heimerdinger's advice. Jace tends to use this people-pleasing behavior as a way to dodge responsibility and avoid thinking for himself. There's a scene between Jace, Victor, and Mel in episode 7 about starting development on Hextech weapons that captures Jace's internal struggles perfectly. Mel plays to Jace's fear and desire to take control of the Piltover and Zahn situation in order to convince him to start making Hextech weaponry. Jace and Victor discuss the idea further after she leaves, and as Jace argues that maybe Hextech will be Piltover's only means of defense, Victor reminds him that there's always a choice. Jace remains unconvinced either way, and he only continues to make decisions based on whatever thoughts other people put in his head rather than based on what he knows to be right. Unfortunately, the only way for Jace to begin taking accountability and reevaluating his actions is for him to witness the consequences of his decisions firsthand. I love Vi and Jace's raid on the mine because she gets to be a tank and he finally gets to swing his big dumb hammer around, but also because the writers contrast the adrenaline of this fight perfectly with the dire consequences of their impulsive aggression. It's almost absurd how much much the writers torture Jace in order to hammer this point home. Ha ha. Although this is child's play compared to season 2. I'm just saying, I sincerely doubt this kid would survive being blasted in the chest with arcane energy and falling multiple stories onto the hard floor, but no, go stand in the corner and watch the child laborer die a slow and painful death, Jace. It's through this scene that Jace can no longer claim ignorance or push the blame onto someone else's influence. He fully accepts the part that he's played in this, and even when Vi insists they have to keep up the fight against Silco, he doesn't fight fire with fire. For the rest of episode 9, we actually get a return to the more humble, good-hearted Jace we saw at the beginning of the show. He turns his flaws of being quick to act and easily influenced into strengths, as he immediately starts working to amend his mistakes and listen to the right voices. He successfully proposes a peace deal to Silco and saves Victor from killing himself. Epic win! Jace's final scene in Season 1 captures what makes him endearing, and what motivates you to see him come out the other side of his poor decisions throughout Acts 2 and 3. As Jace addresses the Council for one of the last times, he explains the nuances of Piltover and Zaun's conflict in probably the most thoughtful way we see from a topsider. He's no longer desperate to please corrupt counselors, and he uses his influence to give voice to the more grounded perspectives of Victor and Mel. When his compassion and protectiveness is restrained by a set of guiding principles, he can be an effective force for positive change. While most of us won't become the de facto leader of a powerful government by 30, Jace's loss of innocence— No, I don't mean it like that!
My wife said, if you win, we'll fly to Asia. If I win, we'll fly to Paris. I bet you won't get toned with just
There we go.
Jace's loss of innocence and journey to see the world in a more mature, thoughtful way is something many people can relate to. The careful way in which the writers detail his moments of poor judgment and attempts to set things right prevents him from being a caricature. Instead, Jace is at times a painfully realistic exploration of the idea that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, while still providing a genuine argument that it's never too late to take responsibility and return to the principles you once fought for.
When you're going to change the world, don't ask for permission.
Well, we made it to my personal favorites, so best characterization, best character growth, best internal struggles, best one-liners, best face card, the end. Haha, just kidding, but not really. Maybe it's my bias for scientific.
Yeah, I do believe, out of the two, Jace and Victor, I was more interested in Victor's plotline more over than Jace's plotline. Even though he was the one who we got more into the arcane stuff. And we see how that went. So people are like, okay, they're doing the same stuff to they're changing the arcane, and they're giving Victor's role a different way of how he is in the lore. So people assumed that he was going to try and go more in line how he was in the lore a bit more, but season 2 went a whole different direction.
Hubris characters talking, but it's impressive how effectively the writers draw you into the tragedy of Victor's journey in Season 1, considering his lesser amount of screen time. I was surprised by how little he was actually in the show watching Season 1 back, because I thought I remembered him having more scenes, and that's thanks to his efficient character writing, and maybe thanks to the fact that I was locked in anytime he appeared on screen. There's an element of meta-narrative to the way Victor's story is portrayed in Season 1. For most of Acts 1 and 2, he functions like an accessory to Jace, and much of his scenes revolve around his reactions to something Jace has done. In Act 1, although the writers certainly do a good job of characterizing his individual motivations and foreshadowing possible character flaws to further develop, Victor feels a bit like Jace's sidekick in their quest to unlock Hextech. He almost fades into the background during episodes 4 and 5, becoming an afterthought for the audience like he has for Jace. It isn't until the infamous sex core scene at the end of episode 5 that the show really gives weight to his struggles and warns us of some concerning behaviors that are about to spiral out of control. I feel like the best analog for Victor's character arc is Nietzschean philosophy. I'm really trying not to be pretentious. Please ignore the fact that I used the terms meta-narrative and Nietzschean in the span of 2 paragraphs. I genuinely couldn't find better words to use. I'll be completely transparent that my knowledge of Overman theory comes mainly from my AP English class and a Hello Future Me video. Love you, Tim. So if we have any Nietzsche stands in the audience, forgive me if I miss some of the finer details. The thing is, Victor's arc is arguably the most abstract of Arcane's cast and the ideas it aims to explore, so drawing some broad parallels to real-world philosophy will help me articulate my thoughts on it better. The end of episode 5 is the beginning of Victor's loss of humanity and his embracing of a utilitarian worldview. The writers contrast Jace compromising his principles for the sake of passion with Victor refusing human connection in the form of Sky to further his progress on Hextech because it demonstrates his rejection of traditional values in the pursuit of a superior, evolved state of being. And because it's funny. What makes his rejection of Sky tragically ironic is the knowledge that she could have provided crucial help with Hextech, with the reveal that he inspired her to pursue her own further research. But as Victor becomes more dangerously obsessed with Hextech, he almost seems like he wants to do this alone. The Glorious Evolution is basically Nietzsche with robots. As the season goes on, Victor's approach to Hextech more and more resembles the Nietzschean overman, the idea that particularly skilled, disciplined, or enlightened individuals can bring mankind to a more evolved form of existence by rising above the constraints of traditional value systems and redefining what it means to be human. Even from his first appearances, there was a sense that Victor considered himself as being an exception to the rule. Sure, him encouraging Jace to break into Heimerdinger's lab and pretending that they were just trying to go to his bedroom when he gets caught is silly and fun, but this is in fact unsanctioned research that has already endangered the lives of innocent civilians and was agreed upon by the council to be so dangerous that they considered banishing Jace for it. Yet, as Victor says to Jace in their conversation at the apartment, he only got as far as he did because he believed in his own greatness. This reflects in how stubbornly he fights to bring Hextech to the masses, never affording much consideration to the perspectives of others. Admittedly, this is often justified, but it's somewhat concerning that he doesn't place much value on Heimerdinger's advice, who has altruistic motivations and can back up his perspective with lived experience. Even though it's admirable how Victor's unwilling to compromise on his mission to bring equality between the Undercity and Topside through technology, this trait can easily become dangerous if he starts pursuing the wrong goals, which is something Episode 6 sets up. In his conversation with Heimerdinger, Victor's fear of death comes from the fact that he won't leave behind anything of value, that his potential to advance Hextech and create a better world will be wasted. While he's not being purposefully selfish, his words indicate a savior complex that will drive him to cross ethical boundaries for the greater good of humanity. The way Episode 6 contrasts young Victor's repulsion at Singe's unethical experiments on Rio with current Victor's grim acceptance of his progress at all costs approach perfectly captures his loss of innocence and betrayal of the values he used to hold. When Singe gives Victor Shimmer to allow him to experiment on himself, he warns him that Piltover will turn their backs on him for this, speaking from experience as Heimerdinger's former partner. Victor responds that Jace will understand. In saying this, he's singling out him and Jace as exceptional individuals, Overman figures that bear the burden of knowledge. Victor doesn't deny that Piltover will view this action as evil, but he believes Jace will understand his choice as a fellow man of progress who is willing to break traditional understandings of right and wrong to advance humanity. Except, his trust in Jace is quickly broken during the Victor Arcane Bridge Slap incident of 2021. The deepening divide between Piltover and Zahn has infected Jace and Victor's relationship. And not only is Jace's bigotry personally hurtful, it indicates how short-sighted his perspective has become, how easily he's drawn into conflicts that encourage mankind's animalistic impulses. With the loss of Jace and Heimerdinger, Victor feels that there's no one else he can trust to understand the necessity of his unethical actions, and it encourages his descent into isolation.
Serious dictation was driving me crazy, so I switched to whisper flow. Here's why I'll never go.
Sky, what are you doing here? For all of Victor's talk about wanting to leave.
Okay, she's making some good points. Did you know, Jace wanted to try and, since he's a council member, he was trying to clean out some of the corruption that he found out that the other councilors was behind. But doing that made Victor having to work on the Hextech himself and having to go to Singe for alternative means in order to improve upon it. And yeah, that bridge scene was good. Jay saying, "No, where we been?" Victor like, "I had a guy in Zahn I told you about." And then Jay's like, "Oh, but Zahn's dangerous, and they don't understand." But then Victor clapped back and like, "Bro, I'm from that's my turf. That's my hometown. How can you say that?" Like shit. I'm sorry, bro. Pound the back and get off.
leave a legacy behind, this is one example staring him right in the face of how he directly improved the life of a fellow Zonite, someone who maybe could have helped preserve his Hextech dream after his death. The show perfectly captures how hollow his achievements feel in light of the innocent life he sacrificed, how quickly the sense of power and control the Hex Core provided him has dissipated. Even so, he can't bring himself to destroy it. Victor now knows for himself the wisdom Heimerdinger was trying to impart, that such power is corrupting and humanity, in its brokenness, doesn't know how to use it properly. Yet even knowing the danger of something like the Hex Core, he has sacrificed so much to reach this achievement that he's figuratively and literally tied to it. This is his legacy, for better or for worse, and he doesn't have the resolve to erase it. By the end of his journey, it's hard to feel much besides a sense of defeat. While his mix of arrogance and unnecessarily burdening himself contributed to his downfall, many other contributing factors were outside of his control, and you can empathize with his drive to get some of that control back. Fortunately, one of Victor's final scenes in Season 1 provides some hope, as his reconciliation with Jace captures the strengths of both of their characters. Their shared sense of determination makes them an effective team. They were the only people who were able to crack the code behind an advancement that had the potential to bridge the gap between Piltover and Zon. This determination also manifested in damaging ways, causing Jace to become impulsive and close-minded, betraying Victor's vision for their creation and contributing to his sense of isolation, before Victor fully embraced a the ends justify the means mindset. When Jace is willing to listen to the right influences and think for himself, he becomes an effective force for positive change that drives people to actually do something to fix the world's problems. Similarly, when Victor is able to accept the assistance of those he trusts, he can impart his knowledge onto others so that they can further its influence, rather than constraining it to only what he can do in his power. Victor's efficient character writing in Act 1 leaves an impact on the viewer, and it makes it easy for the audience to feel the tragedy and desperation of his situation alongside him. This keeps his journey into mad scientist territory near the end of the story from feeling jarring, as you can quickly empathize with his fear over wasting the knowledge and opportunity he's been gifted with to help those in need, who are still stuck in the same situation he used to be in. The narrative effectively explores how Victor's willingness to take risks and pursue progress at any cost can be detrimental to himself and others, yet aspirational and altruistic when constrained by a set of strong principles.
It scares them all.
What about you?
I recognize it any worthwhile venture.
Oh yes, I'm curious to see how she said about Mel. Mel, out of all the characters, given that one, she's an original character for Arcane, including Mbessa, well, until later, where she was a champion for the game. I enjoy Mel was probably one of my favorite characters in Arcane, at least in Season 1. To see how she turned out in Season 2, but yeah, waste of potential.
Involves risk.
Mel is one of my favorite political creatures in fiction. I find it interesting that she could easily be one of the background counselors in the show, who are almost comical in how corrupt, self-preserving, and, for lack of a better word, hoity-toity they are. In reality, Mel is a pointedly accurate depiction of how these Machiavellian values manifest in real-life politicians, leaders who appear rational or altruistic but can be just as self-serving as the stereotypical evil military dictator. At the same time, you can tell there's a part of her that wants to believe in her espoused virtues of progress and equality, a part of her that struggles against her firsthand knowledge of power and human nature gained from growing up in a disciplinary society like Noxus. Besides some issues I have with her character in Act 3, the writers walk the line well when developing Mel's internal conflict, making what could have been a one-dimensional depiction of a cunning politician compelling to watch. From her first scene, it's clear that Mel's priority is to transform Piltover into a world power. Interestingly, she avoids using force or aggression, instead buying favor with the other counselors so that she essentially owns the council. She's opportunistic, making all the right moves to push people into taking whatever actions she wants. Yet as the story unfolds, various factors arise that threaten her position as the one pulling the strings. On a political level, Jinx's erratic violence and progress with the gemstone sends the relationship between Piltover and Zon spiraling out of control. And on a personal level, her relationship with Jace is the first instance of her taking interest in someone beyond how they can serve her own ends. Mel is attracted to Jace for many reasons, but most importantly, he represents the more idealistic part of her that she lost in the process of becoming a powerful politician. He convinces her to give him a chance with Hextech by appealing to Piltover's virtues. their role as a beacon of progress and prosperity. While she spends much of Act 2 molding Jace in her image by electing him to the council and convincing him to cut deals to advance hex tech, he's the first person that we see encourage her to be vulnerable, as she opens up to him about her complicated family dynamic. When we enter Act 3, the question remains whether or not Mel will release some of her control by negotiating with the Undercity to end the conflict, or keep the current power structure intact by using force. Her transformation in Act 3 is poorly explored, the most obvious casualty of the somewhat sudden jump in pacing. The scene of Mel, Jace, and Victor debating the creation of Hextech weaponry in Episode 7 establishes that she has a grim acceptance that war between the two cities may be necessary, even if she doesn't want to provoke one. With that foundation for her mindset, it's strange to me that the sight of dead enforcers piled up on the bridge and the barricade blown to pieces doesn't motivate her to use at least a minimal amount of force to re-establish order. Along with the knowledge that Kino was murdered, Mel should have more motivation to further the development of Hextech weaponry. A transitory scene in Episode 8 would have helped get her from this point to being committed to pure diplomacy and against any form of counterattack.
Okay, I agree with that statement. Given, yes, she should have seen all the enforcer bodies on the ground, on the bridge, after episode, the stuff with Jinx and Echo on the bridge. So she's like, all right, let's have Hextech. Let's not use it for war, but let's have it for like a countermeasure in case we do have to go to war with Zahn. We have this in our back pocket so we can protect ourselves,
allowing the audience to see inside her changed mindset. The writers somewhat justify Mel's perspective after the fact with her confrontation of Ambessa in Episode 9, demonstrating how Ambessa's manipulation of Jace to pursue an aggressive response against the Undercity and attempt to run Mel City from behind the scenes has made the issue personal for her. It's impressive how effectively the writers communicate the nuances of Mel and Ambessa's relationship with their little screen time together. While it would have been more engaging to see Mel struggle with her need to be in control and fear of sacrificing her own influence for the sake of her values, the introduction of Ambessa near the end of the show does serve as an effective vehicle to force Mel to confront what she truly believes. The climax of her arc being her placing down her Noxian ring and voting in support of a diplomatic solution with the Undercity serves as a defiance of the leader Ambessa tried to mold her into. She's willing to sacrifice her control for the benefit of both Zahn and Piltover, granting Zahn freedom from Piltover's overreach and trusting them to address their own issues. As she says in Episode 3, any worthwhile venture involves risk, and through the outside influences of Jason and Ambessa, Mel has been pushed to truly make her actions match her beliefs. She's realized it's more important to be a moral example on the world stage rather than a powerful nation, allowing Piltover to be placed in a vulnerable position as a worthy sacrifice for the prosperity of both cities. Mel is compelling to watch, a unique example of a social strategist in the midst of a cast that uses superhuman powers or magic technology to defeat their opponents. It's disappointing that the writers somewhat gloss over her internal transformation and the strength it takes her to truly achieve the societal progress she claims is her goal by releasing her tight grip on her own power. Even so, in her best moments, Mel effectively conveys the struggle for a strategic politician to learn that sometimes the best way to achieve progress is to use their influence to enact real change and give power back to the people.
It's all right. Despite it all, I can tell. You have a good heart.
I would say the essential trait of Caitlyn's character is trust. The fact that this is simultaneously her greatest strength and fatal flaw reflects how she's a compelling exploration of the challenge of believing that there is a clear right and wrong in an unjust and cruel world. Her trust in Vi is what facilitates her personal growth. Her willingness to ultimately cooperate with Vi is what gives her the first-hand experience of the Undercity's suffering that makes her an effective force for positive change. At the same time, Caitlyn places her trust in the wrong people to her own detriment. She fails her major opportunity to establish peace between Piltover and Zahn by trusting that Marcus was an honorable enforcer who would return the Hextech gemstone to the council. What makes Caitlyn interesting beyond just being the good one of Piltover's elite is that the conflict between her strong sense of morality and the unfair reality of the world she lives in is well explored. While Caitlyn is sheltered due to her privileged upbringing and somewhat ambivalent to the societal structure of Piltover, the writers establish early on how her commitment to her principles causes her to question Topside's values. When Jace is seen as an outcast because of his defiance of the council, she's frustrated by the fact that her family doesn't show the same kindness to him that they had beforehand. In episode 4, the writers contrast Caitlin treating criminals with the basic care and decency that she would afford anyone else, with the enforcer's dehumanization of the incarcerated. Her opening vignette in episode 5 captures this aspect of her character perfectly. She's uninterested in her parents' hoity-toity socialite mingling. I don't know if anybody says hoity-toity nowadays, but it's really amusing to me now. Instead, she spends her time doing something of actual value, sharpening her marksmanship skills in a hunting contest with Grayson. When Grayson holds her shot so that Caitlin can win, Caitlin's first assumption is that she was paid off by her parents. But Grayson explains this was her own choice, a way to honor Caitlin's hard work. Grayson is a rare example of someone who shows kindness to Caitlin because she respects who she is as an individual, rather than because she's the daughter of an influential family. They have a unique connection as people who act on principle and a culture.
Yep, that other enforcer who was in line with Vander, even though she didn't have much screen time, she was a pretty, I guess just like Vander, she was a pretty good foil. Because I guess for him, he was more like for the Zahn part, and she was more like a Piltover, and the two of them are trying to work the system to try and keep a small semblance of peace between both cities, so no conflict like the bridge from the first episode doesn't occur a second time.
A culture that values individuals based on how wealthy or powerful they are. It explains why Caitlin would adopt Grayson's philosophy of using her position as an enforcer to protect the vulnerable and uphold a sense of right and wrong. At the same time, Caitlin's commitment to her principles can be a weakness. Her initial interactions with Vi reveal the rigidity of her morality. She tends to simplify Topside as the good place and the Undercity as the bad place, and this mix of ignorance and arrogance causes her to neglect Piltover's role in creating Zahn's suffering. As it is for many characters in Arcane, Caitlin's relationship with Vi and effort to understand her perspective is what naturally facilitates her overcoming this flaw. Admittedly, the development of Vi and Caitlin's romance is rushed, and it mainly frustrates me because we don't get to see how Vi wrestles with feeling attracted to someone wearing the uniform of her parents' murderers as well as her abusers for her past 7 years in prison. Cynically, it seems like the writers are less concerned about this issue and more about getting their Kate Vi brothel cabin on. Vi should remain emotionally closed off to Caitlin until she goes out of her way to save her from Savika and tend to her wounds, giving her reason to trust her enough to form a relationship. Ultimately, having Vi and Caitlin bond over their shared desire to protect the vulnerable and bring justice to the conflict between Zahn and Piltover is an interesting direction for both of their characters. I only dislike how the writers remove Vi's agency to accomplish this. Despite Caitlin's effort to understand Vi's perspective and reconsider her own worldview, all of her attempts at improving the relationship between Zahn and Piltover fail. She's betrayed by Marcus, who almost successfully kills her before Jinx activates her Firelight explosives. Her presentation to the council fails when Vi gets frustrated by the fact that Topside seems unwilling to make Silco face any consequences for his crimes. Throughout season 1, her conception of good and evil has been slowly broken down, and there's a sense of lost innocence by the time we reach the final confrontation between Vi and Jinx. Before Caitlin has much time to process the reality of how little power she has to improve society in the way she wants to, Jinx kidnaps her, effectively pushing her to the edge. Despite following a no-killing rule in the past and seemingly believing in the humanity of criminals, Caitlin expresses a grim acceptance that she will have to kill Jinx, seeing nothing in her but a force of unmitigated destruction. Even so, she can't bring herself to go through with it, partly out of a last bit of hope that violence isn't the only solution and out of her love for Vi. But when Caitlin lowers her guard, Jinx uses it as an opportunity to knock her unconscious, making her powerless to stop the eventual nuking of the council. In some ways, Caitlin's arc in season 1 seems simplistic compared to the rest of the cast. It follows the conventional beats of the privileged rebel archetype, an individual who breaks the established order of their wealthy upbringing and does nice things for poor people. But the writers add unique twists to Caitlin's journey, exploring how she struggles with the dissonance between her idealistic morality and the harsh reality of Zahn and Piltover. By her arc's conclusion, Caitlin has realized what she thought was a simple mission of arresting bad guys to fix the world's problems is, in reality, a hydra of various issues, ranging from interpersonal dynamics all the way to corrupt government structures. The question remains whether Caitlin will continue to fight for the perceived goodness of humanity or become as cynical as the world around her.
Scientists at the National Institute of Dental Research have invented a powerful sour liquid that can regrow teeth and
This city was founded to be a bastion of enlightenment in a world that cannibalized itself over power and pride.
Okay, for Heimerdinger, he was okay in season 1. From what I understand, from what I know from the lore, he's not as... He had some good ideas, but they didn't really use them. He felt like more like one of them shafted characters. At least in the season 2.
But we've forgotten.
My favorite thing about Heimerdinger in season 1 is how in the span of one scene, he can go from, "Oh, Fizzwidget, where did I put my wrench?" to, "I have witnessed horrors beyond the comprehension of your mortal mind." And it somehow never feels jarring. His wacky old scientistness actually contributes to his character growth, keeping him from...
Okay, yeah, I did like that. In season 1, he had funny moments, both funny and serious moments, given what I understand, he's a very long-aged race. So he would understand the dangers of using hex tech more than anybody else.
from feeling like an annoying distraction in a generally dark and edgy show. Heimerdinger has a unique perspective on the show's central issues of progress and societal change because of his near immortality. He's almost a walking representation of history, able to impart the lessons he's learned firsthand to the younger, more inexperienced characters. At the same time, his age is a roadblock that prevents him from understanding humanity's struggles and causes his sense of complacency. This is the internal struggle that defines Heimerdinger and makes him an interesting exploration of when and how to take action in response to societal issues. Throughout Acts 1 and 2, Heimerdinger's mix of being stubbornly resistant to change and yet passive towards the way the wind blows makes him essentially ineffective. He's able to temporarily convince Jace not to unveil the Hextech gemstones before they're ready, but when Mel takes advantage of the fear surrounding the missing gemstone to argue for Jace to be a counselor, Heimerdinger reluctantly agrees with her. Heimerdinger expresses concerns about how powerful Hextech is becoming, but he's unable to actually convince Jace and Victor to turn back until the Hex Score becomes the only means of saving Victor's life, fueling Jace's decision to kick Heimerdinger off the council. It isn't until Act 3, when Heimerdinger visits the Undercity and forms a partnership with Echo, that he confronts how truly destructive his complacency was. Much of his warnings about the dangers of Hextech are proven to be true, but he's too passive to take the actions necessary to prevent this. Still, his outlook is flawed in that it denies the potential good of innovations like Hextech. Echo demonstrates to him that the Undercity has talented minds with incredible potential if they're given the resources needed to succeed. It's arguably something Heimerdinger already knew, considering his close mentorship of Victor, but that he lost to his ambivalence and fear of change. While Heimerdinger doesn't act explicitly in self-interest and promotes a better future for everyone, his resistance to change holds him back from being a truly effective force for good. Although he can't undo his role in the dangerous growth of Hextech and the further conflict between Zahn and Piltover, his active effort to help Echo and the Firelights demonstrates the beginning of his journey to put his principles into practice.
It's not enough to give people what they need to survive. You have to give them what they need to live.
Most people agree that Echo is the MVP of Season 1, and Season 2 for that matter. I mean...
Yep, I agree with that one. Besides, in Season 1, my favorite characters overall, it would have been... It had to be Vi, Echo, Jinx, Soko, and then Caitlyn. Overall, I think, yeah, besides Vi and Caitlyn, Jinx and Vi, Caitlyn and Jinx and Soko, Echo was the other character who had the most screen time and whose role in this show I was also interested in looking more into.
He really is a breath of fresh air in the midst of everything. Everybody loves the charismatic leader of a scrappy rebel alliance with sick hoverboards. But even with his fairly small amount of screen time, the writers make Echo so much more interesting than just the boy savior. While he is arguably Arcane's most heroic character, he's not blindly hopeful. When we meet him again in episode 7, you can feel how the trials he's endured has hardened and refined the optimistic sense of rebellion he had in Act 1, even if his mean muggin is a little bit much. In some ways, I view Echo as a balance between Vander and Silco's approaches to resistance against Piltover. Vander was so fearful of causing violence or bloodshed that it limited how much of an impact he could have on Zahn's situation, while Silco was comfortable justifying even the destructive spread of Shimmer if it ultimately increased Zahn's power in some way. That's putting it simplistically, though I figure you guys have heard enough of me yapping about these two. Unlike Vander, Echo accepts the necessity of sacrifice, but unlike Silco, he inspires people to join his fight through his willingness to give everything he has for his people, rather than coercing them through fear or violence. Interestingly, while Echo is the greatest source of hope for the Undercity, his outlook is very grounded. He's willing to work with Caitlin to return the gemstone, but he ensures that he maintains possession of it so that she can't pull any topside shenanigans. He understands Vi's desire to still believe that Jinx is not a lost cause, but he has years of first-hand experience and plenty of lost friends to know how apathetic she's become to the idea of killing fellow Zahnites. While Echo is optimistic that the Firelight community can continue to transform Zahn, he's accepted the fact that as a leader, he will have to be careful who he makes his allies and his enemies, even if it means taking the life of a childhood friend. The issue is that making a tough decision and executing it are two very different things. This is something that Echo realizes during the iconic bridge fight between him and Jinx, his moment of hesitation revealing the vulnerability he's tried to let go of and proving to be his undoing. The core trait that drives him is compassion, a desire to protect those who have been hurt by Silco and Piltover. The end of Echo and Jinx's fight is especially effective at emphasizing the tragedy of this situation, while still leaving it ambiguous to the viewers whether this was a moment of strength or weakness for Echo. While Echo doesn't go through any dramatic character changes this season, this small moment is delivered so well that it quickly endeared much of the fan base to him, and hinted that there was a lot more nuance to his character than just the cool rebel leader. His partnership with Heimerdinger foreshadows a possible route to peace between Zahn and Piltover, although knowing that the council's about to get nuked does sour the mood of their treehouse playdate. Unlike a lot of the main cast, Echo becomes stronger and maintains his fighting spirit in spite of the suffering he's endured, and the question remains whether or not he will be able to preserve these values as a leader of what will likely be the last humanitarian faction during a Zahn and Piltover war.
Do I look afraid?
No. You look weak.
Sevilla.
Oh, yeah.
This is the quickest way to go from AI beginner to AI fluent in 2026. Watch.
Savika's my favorite Arcane NPC, and I'm...
Yeah, same here. In season 1, I'm like, alright, I know we got some characters have their main roles, and some characters have their side roles, but there's smaller, even smaller characters who are that have less screen time, like, alright, Savika. I was very much invested in what she was going to do in at the end of season 1. Given 1, Silco was dead. Now she doesn't have an arm anymore. So what's she gonna do in season 2? And they hyped us up like, oh, Savika gonna get some screen time. Like, oh, is she? He was in the trailer. I'm like, oh, Savika's getting some screen time. And season 2 came. And
I mean this in the nicest way possible. With her first dialogue scene in episode 2, it seems like she's just a generic representation of Vander's detractors, the amorphous blob of disgruntled Zahnites that are tired of being police brutality. Admittedly, I kind of forgot how comically cruel she was in season 1. She just gets a little too much enjoyment from beating up a teenager in front of her dad, in my opinion. Yet even from her first scene, Savika's dissatisfaction with Vander's inaction is treated with nuance, and her character is effectively fleshed out throughout the rest of season 1. Despite the fact she easily could have faded into the background as Silco's muscle. As I described earlier with the whole beating up children thing, Savika isn't exactly virtuous, but in no way is she unprincipled. She doesn't follow Silco out of a superficial desire for power or to wreak havoc on enforcers in the way a lower level lackey like Deckard did. Rather, she has a strong admiration and dedication to Silco, seeing him as the solution to everything that frustrated her about Vander. It's only natural then that Jinx's instability and tendency to do more harm to Zahn than good should would be very annoying to her. She views Soko's attachment to Jinx as irrational as Vander's attachment to his kids. The resentment between Savika and Jinx builds throughout Season 1. Savika views Jinx as a threat to achieving Zaun's independence, and Jinx views Savika as someone that could convince Silco to betray her. The more Silco loses control over Jinx and the closer she gets to reuniting with Vi, the more this becomes a stumbling block for Savika. The blockade produces a growing sense of dissatisfaction among the Chem Barons, and Finn presents Savika with an opportunity to take the reins and steer Zaun back in the right direction. It speaks to how well that the writers developed Savika that the scene where she and Finn meet with Silco is genuinely tense, yet at the same time, it's completely understandable that her loyalty to Silco wins out and she crushes any sense of rebellion among the Chem Barons. Unfortunately, this happens in literally the last episode of Season 1, and we don't get to see much more of Savika, besides punching the queen of punching children herself. Similar to Echo, it's fun to imagine how Jinx's rocket and the death of Silco will impact her character in Season 2. The brief flash we get of her during the ending montage, showing her struggling to light a cigarette as Silco's empty chair looms in the background, raises an interesting question. Who will Savika be when she doesn't have Silco to lead her? Her decision not to take the power grab offered by Finn indicates a deep loyalty to Silco and his cause, as well as maybe a sense of comfortability in being a follower rather than a leader. It's thanks to her efficient writing in Season 1 that we can excitedly speculate about how she will carry on his legacy and what sacrifices she will be willing to make for the nation of Zaun.
If you want to last in this world, you must learn to be both the...
Okay, I agree with that. At the end of Season 1, like, alright, what they're going to do with Savika? Because we didn't see her, she wasn't given as much screen time as the other characters, because she wasn't that important. She's more like a Soko's right hand. So when they did show her at the end of Season 1, oh, okay. So she lost an arm, and we see her trying to smoke a cigarette. So how is she going to, what's her dynamic going to be in Season 2? Like, given that she didn't want to take the leadership role.
The fox and the wolf.
I remember the distinct feeling of stress when I first watched Season 1 and Mbessa was introduced. You might assume my thought process was, oh no, I hope Mel can stop her mom from starting a war, but it was actually more along the lines of, why in the world did the writers decide to introduce a major antagonist and leader of an entirely separate country within the last 2 episodes? Admittedly, maybe holding off on Mbessa's introduction would have improved the somewhat frantic pacing of Act 3, and in some ways, she comes off as a plot device to stoke the flames of the growing conflict. Despite my concerns, Mbessa serves as an interesting foil to Mel, and with how effectively her character is established, she's compelling to follow beyond how she impacts other characters. Even Mbessa, who easily could have served as the generic big bad that everyone would unite against to save the world, has a well-developed set of principles that drives her actions like the rest of the cast. This is best captured by Mel's opening vignette in Episode 8. Interestingly enough, Mbessa doesn't execute the rebellious Black Rose Witch simply out of bloodlust. She has a utilitarian form of discipline, explaining that the death of one rebel is necessary to establish a standard and prevent the deaths of thousands more. It's as if the tough love she shows to Mel bleeds into how she leads Noxus. Another layer is added to Mbessa when Mel confronts her about why she banished her to Piltover, and Mbessa admits that Mel's discomfort with her cruel discipline was too difficult for her to bear. Mbessa's love for Mel and desire to protect her family is genuine, even though her duty as a Noxian general causes it to manifest in a strange way. Mbessa expresses to Mel that she needs to use the war in Piltover to develop the weapons needed to protect them from the Black Rose, and then offers for Mel to return as the leader of Noxus. It's clear Mbessa loves Mel, but her desire to mold her into a ruthless general like herself puts a strong barrier between them. Rather than trying to prove her evilness through extreme cruelty and lust for power, Mbessa's humanity actually makes her all the more threatening and engaging to watch. It helps you understand why Mel would still want a relationship with her, and it forces you to engage with her perspective. After all, with the nuking of the council at the end of Season 1, Mbessa may be proven right in saying that there is only one option left: war.
Hey Bermuda, it's Alonzo Bowden. Listen, you just got a couple of weeks to get your tickets for Just for Laughs Bermuda.
In an interesting parallel to Season 1, Season 2 opens with a wordless scene dropping us in the aftermath of the attack on the council. Jace and Mel are, somewhat suspiciously, unscathed. Shula isn't substantially injured, Salo's legs have been crushed under a pile of rubble, and Cassandra, Balbach, and Fat Guy have all perished. As Mbessa orders enforcers around, Season 1.
Love watching Arcane when I feel like because no matter how I'm feeling, Vi and Jinx are probably feeling worse.
In a way, it's difficult to analyze Vi's journey in Season 2 because it often contradicts itself. Season 1 provided a fresh take on an archetypical protagonist with Vi. Her relationships with Vander, Jinx, and Caitlyn clearly demonstrated how she needed to learn that her fists won't solve all of her problems. The climax of her arc summarizes this lesson. She only wins her fight with Savika because she's motivated to protect the people she loves rather than get back at the people who have wronged her, represented by her learning to block. Much of Season 2 criticizes Vi for supposedly giving up on Jinx, only to punish her in the end for refusing to give up on Vander and believing that she and Jinx can live together in peace. As a result, it's hard to comment on whether or not Vi's journey was conveyed effectively because I don't know what direction the writers want to take her in or what flaws she's supposed to confront. The feeling.
Okay, so for Vi in Season 2, her relationship, getting back at Jinx, 1, it felt too quick and fast. It needed more build-up and more episodes to flesh that part out. 2, the Caitlyn and Vi relationship seemed like the main focus of Season 2. Like, it was fine. Their relationship in Season 1 was good. I enjoyed it. But it felt kind of rushed in Season 2. Like, okay, what's going on here? And then 3, her joining the Enforcers. Like, okay, I know she wants to do this, but that part there, that felt too quick. Because at the end of the episode, like, yep, okay, on here, here's the Enforcer badge. And Vi was hesitant to take it. And then at the end of that episode, he's like, yep, I'm an Enforcer now. I'm like, wait, what happened to all this, the build-up and the struggle in the first season? And all the conflict between Zahn and Piltover. Now that she's an Enforcer? Right off the bat? Like, no. That should have needed more time as well. Like, it was too quick.
Feeling that the writers don't know what to do with Vi is pervasive throughout Season 2 and how easily she's thrown around by the plot and whims of other characters rather than actively pursuing her own goals, like protecting her family or getting revenge on Silco in the past season. The only justification we get for Vi becoming an Enforcer, despite Enforcers having murdered her parents and abused her for 7 years in prison and agreeing to unleash the Grey on the Undercity, which we know has caused people in the Undercity to develop terminal illness, is that Caitlyn wants her to. The transition from her asking Caitlyn not to give in to fear and call off the invasion to joining the task force is handled off screen.
You need to find a way to call off.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Oh yeah, there's another reason there. The gas. Like, if I was summoning Zahn and you knew Vi, I'm like, wait a minute, what the hell, girl? You helped the same people who tormented and abused our people, and now you're going to put this poisonous gas in the streets?
Call off the invasion. What?
Similarly, Vi is drawn out of her depressive slump and goes on a dangerous mission to find her seemingly resurrected father in an abandoned mine because Jinx wants her to. The last these two left off, they were calling each other monsters for committing war crimes and acts of terrorism, and Vi was only stopped from smashing Jinx's head in because of Isha. She has no reason to want to work with or even believe Jinx, let alone wander into an abandoned mine where she could easily kill her. Jinx and Caitlyn are the biggest influences in Vi's life this season, and they both cause massive damage to her character by removing her agency, as I described. Vi's inability to accept that Powder was gone was one of her biggest flaws. In a selfish way, she needed to believe that she could reach Powder so that she could still view herself as the protector, and avoid carrying the guilt of how she contributed to the creation of Jinx. By the finale of Season 1, there was a grim sense of acceptance that Vi and Jinx had taken different paths, and that Vi needed to recognize Jinx as her own individual with the autonomy to choose how she's going to process her pain. Vi can make efforts towards reconciliation with Jinx, but the relationship relationship is a two-way street, and Jinx will ultimately have to decide whether she will take the path of peace or of vengeance. Act 1 of Season 2 turns this assumption on its head by portraying Vi's somber acceptance that Powder has embraced Jinx as unfairly giving up on her sister, making her act out of character with little explanation. It follows that Vi would want to go on a vigilante mission to bring Jinx to justice after the finale of Season 1, and she still displays an expected level of reluctance and discomfort with the idea. Yet shortly after this, she goes on a bender and drunkenly rambles about wanting to hide from all her problems, with a brief acknowledgement that, well, I did traumatize my sister and play a role in her becoming a terrorist whose actions may lead to a war that results in the total annihilation of the Undercity, I guess. It's odd that Vi, a character who was so action-oriented and persistent that it was often to her own detriment, doesn't immediately strike it out on her own to capture Jinx like she did against Silco at the end of Season 1, let alone consider living in blissful drunken ignorance while her hometown gets massacred by Hextech weapons. Vi then becoming an enforcer and gassing Zaun is such a clear betrayal of her principles that happens far too quickly, to the point it feels like the writers are purposefully assassinating her character to make Jinx appear more sympathetic in comparison. It does give Jinx an advantage in her interactions with Vi following the battle, something Jinx can use as an Uno reverse anytime Vi brings up the number of people she killed while working for Silco. Much of Act 2 feels like the writers are using Vi as a punching bag, losing any sense of nuance when it comes to her relationship with Jinx. During her cat fight with Jinx in the mines, Vi gives Isha the Powder special and doesn't even attempt to comfort her. Considering the immense amount of guilt Vi carries about how she lashed out at Powder, you think she would be horrified with herself for repeating this mistake. I don't mind the writers taking a more critical look at Vi when it comes to her relationship with Jinx. What frustrates me is that they make her act out of character and remove her agency to accomplish this. Their relationship used to be a painfully honest reflection of toxic family dynamics that inspired natural empathy for both girls from the audience. So why are the writers going out of their way to make Vi seem like a big meanie and Jinx a helpless victim? Anyway, even if I do accept that Vi now willingly participates in police brutality and drinks away her problems rather than doing anything to help defend her city from invading enforcers, her new arc ends by punishing her for trying to address these flaws or reconcile with Jinx. How can the show spend all of Act 2 chastising Vi for not believing that Jinx has changed, portraying her as being so consumed by her anger that she participates in cruelty towards the Undercity, only to end Episode 9 with the message of "you can't save him" and framing her letting Jinx go as necessary? The writers are hardcore gaslighting Vi. Her arc lacks the clear follow-through of her journey with Jinx in Season 1, the consistent demonstration of how her inability to acknowledge Jinx's agency and need to fix her only did more damage than good. Vi and Caitlyn's relationship is similarly confusing, and Vi is often used as a litmus test for Caitlyn's vengeance arc rather than a character in her own right. When Caitlyn is mean to Vi, you know she's falling to the dark side. But when she decides to be nice to Vi again, you know she's a good guy and all can be forgiven. Vi has such a fatal case of simp syndrome this season that anytime she disagrees with Caitlyn, she will without fail end up admitting she was in the wrong and Caitlyn was right the whole time. She rejects the badge, then ends up joining Caitlyn's task force in the same episode. She criticizes Caitlyn for arresting Jinx and allying herself with Ambessa, then admits she was a fool for believing that Jinx could change in the same episode. The one time Vi does stand her ground and maintain that she did the right thing by taking Caitlyn out of the fight with Jinx so that Isha wouldn't be harmed, she's punished for it and becomes the worst version of herself. By the time Caitlyn attacks Vi in episode 6, Vi's already decided to forgive her despite no attempt at making amends from Caitlyn. Happy wife, happy life, am I right? Admittedly, Season 1 also had the issue of downplaying Vi's internal struggles that would prevent her from being intimate with Caitlyn in order to speedrun their relationship. Something something prison trauma, something something lesbian cop cabanon. I talked about this earlier, so I won't waste your time. In spite of these issues, Season 1 made the effort to display the development of trust between these two, mainly by having them go out of their way to protect one another and show each other the same care they would afford anyone else. Their relationship.
Okay, yes, I do agree with that. And Vi's, she was all over the place in Season 2. Like her motivations and her goals, like her personality just got all mushed and mixed together. Like first she's in this place, now she's over here. Again, I agree. She was a punching bag. So like she had no clear goal in the plot. She kept going here and there, here and there. Like her and Caitlyn getting back together and rekindling their relationship in Season 2, that was way too quick. Like that was like the first time they met each other met each other again in season 2, like, yep, I forgive you now. Like, same to go with Jinx and her. Like that needed more time to flesh out and try and repair itself because that felt too quick.
Relationship lacks any of this nuance in season 2. To clarify, my issue is not that Caitlin is mean to Vi. Again, my analysis is focused on evaluating the effectiveness of the writing rather than the morality of the characters. And Vi is not my baby girl, punch her in the gut as many times as you want for all I care. My problem is that the writing of Vi and Caitlin's relationship is so non-committal that by the end, it feels like little more than pointless suffering for both girls. This is not an interesting examination of how their individual flaws contributed to problems in their relationship, or how the growing tension between Piltover and Zahn has infected their dynamic. It's extremely one-sided as Vi, the infamously stubborn and headstrong character who often ignores the advice of others to her own detriment, constantly acquiesces to the demands of a vengeance-driven Caitlin. The writers could use this for interesting character drama and commentary on toxic relationship dynamics. Instead, they choose to brush their issues under the rug so they can quickly team up in episode 6 and have Caitlin's one moment to acknowledge her cruelty towards Vi in episode 8 amount to little more than I know! I have no idea what this is supposed to say about Vi's character. Should she have taken a firmer stance against Caitlin when she saw her going down a dark path in episode 3? Or should she have been more patient and supportive concerning her grief? Was she right in trying to free Jinx from jail and give her a chance to live a better life? Or should she have just accepted that Jinx can't be fixed and is too much of a problem to exist among normal society? I'm a bit worried my analysis for Vi in season 2 has amounted to little more than a confused rant, but maybe that's how I feel, okay? Listen. We've gotten far enough into this ramble, and I'm starting to feel a little on edge, so let's wrap things up with the Kate Vi prison bang incident of 2024. But before we get down and dirty, this scene honestly broke my heart. Vi's brief monologue may have caused me to shed a single, manly tear because it so perfectly captured what makes her a compelling protagonist to follow, and because Haley Steinfeld gave this character her all despite the lack of good material this season. For all of her flaws, Vi has always acted from a good heart, always been willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of those she wanted to protect. Even if most of us aren't getting into bar fights and raiding mines to protect our family, there's something painfully relatable about her sentiment, the treacherous path of trying to help the people we love in a world where so much is out of our control. It was the first genuine moment of vulnerability and self-awareness for Vi in a season that didn't give her time to explore her feelings or reduced her pain to being an angry drunk. And then Caitlin walks in with her corny Wattpad dialogue.
My wife said, if you win, we'll fly to Asia. If I win, we'll fly to Paris. I bet you won't get toned with just Tai Chi walking before Christmas. Guess who won?
My husband is 57, 264 pounds, and his young trainer tells him he needs to walk 10,000 steps a day to lose weight.
How old is his trainer?
You really think I needed all the parts of the hex gate?
And they bang in a prison cell. No concern for Vi's emotional turmoil in the moment or for Jinx, who just announced her suicidal ideation and disappeared to an undisclosed location. Remember the last...
Yeah, that made no sense. And if they were going to do it, at least do it somebody that's not in that prison cell.
Last time this show had two characters have sex at literally the worst moment possible, but they leaned into the narrative dissonance to make it an effective scene rather than poorly timed fan service. This scene would have been much better if Vi and Caitlin got a moment to reflect on their issues and what it means to repair a broken relationship, something similar to their scene in Caitlin's bedroom in season 1. And they can get as freaky as they want, although there is still the elephant in the...
Yep, I agree with that one. Right. Yeah. Trying to check my something. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, guys, I'm back. Had to go do something real quick.
In the room of Jinx trying to kill herself and the impending destruction of Piltover, but nobody's perfect. Anyway, I wanted to close out Vi's section by talking about this scene because I think it pretty effectively captures the issues with her writing this season, in that it shows how the writers seem uninterested in exploring her issues on a deeper level. Her one moment where she displays probably the most self-awareness she has in the whole show is interrupted to serve the whims of another character. Despite the fact that she should have very strong opinions about what is occurring this season, Vi has lost her status as an active protagonist and is punished in the end when she tries to overcome her flaws. She once told an inspiring and engaging story about the struggle to properly protect those you love, but her poorly executed arc in season 2 feels like little more than pointless misery.
Also becomes a twisted villain. Like, I feel like she's already there. I don't know, watch season 2 and let me know what you think. But that's good. I'm glad you don't hate her.
I would argue that at the time season 1 dropped, Jinx was the most widely praised Arcane character online, and for good reason. The traumatized villain has become such a popular archetype, especially in animated media, that it's an exception to the norm to have an antagonist that doesn't have a sad backstory or isn't redeemable in some way. It's gotten so widespread that a Shrek movie parodied it, but these sorts of parodies also reflect the growing sense of frustration from audiences with this trope, because it started to be used as a crutch by the writers to have these characters commit unspeakable atrocities, only to then buy sympathy from the audience by showing them looking really sad and mentally tormented after the fact. Most frustratingly, they didn't require a consistent character and could behave in whatever way the plot demanded because they were just so crazy. Jinx was a refreshing exception to the rule in season 1 of Arcane, artfully dodging these common pitfalls. The depiction of her desensitization to violence as a twisted coping mechanism never felt exploitative. She had a perfect balance of danger and vulnerability, and the writers didn't feel the need to manufacture empathy from the audience, trusting them to have the maturity to view Jinx with nuance. Despite being extremely apathetic towards death, her powder personality was still allowed to shine through, which felt more like a reflection of the fact that she was genuinely torn between these identities than an attempt to course-correct her brutality with a wacky sense of humor. Most importantly, there was a method to her madness that was conveyed to the audience in a creative yet coherent way. Jinx was simultaneously predictable and unpredictable. Although her behavior could be erratic, it was clear how her feelings of inferiority amongst her peers, abandonment issues caused by Vi, and deep guilt over inadvertently killing her family made her fearful of vulnerability and desperate to earn the affection of others. Silco and Vi were the biggest influences on her life in season 1. Much of what she did was to earn their approval, but her relationships with them were under threat anytime she felt they were deceiving her or trying to take advantage of her. When it comes to season 2, Jinx is, in a way, similarly erratic, jumping from suicidal in Act 1 to well-adjusted in Act 2 back to suicidal in Act 3. The issue is that her writing lacks the clear cause and effect that allowed the audience to follow her twisted thought process, instead being left confused and unengaged. A clear example of this being done well is during the bridge battle in season 1. Despite Vi working with Caitlyn in the prior episode, Jinx is expectedly reluctant to accept that her sister would betray her again and choose to be with an enforcer. The writers naturally facilitate her jumping to the other end of the spectrum by having her see Vi rush onto the bridge to save Caitlyn from Marcus. Logically, we know Vi isn't intentionally choosing Caitlyn over Jinx and loves both of them, but the writers, building off the foundation established by Jinx's breakdown scenes, give us a look into how her paranoia causes her to interpret this as Vi lying to her and abandoning her for Caitlyn. In contrast, Jinx's dramatic character transformations in season 2 feel shaky at best or completely unprompted at worst. In Act 1, her partnership with Savika, someone who constantly pushed for Silco to abandon Jinx, is only justified by Jinx's poorly defined feelings of grief and apathy. These two were constantly tormenting each other in season 1, with only a brief expression of sympathy from Savika in episode 7. I had to control F the phrase daddy issues in my notes to figure out which episode that line was from, by the way. An alliance between Jinx and Savika could be interesting if it was facilitated by either of them confronting a personal flaw. Maybe Savika recognizing Jinx's humanity, or Jinx reflecting on her trust issues, rather than the just.
Okay. In season 2, like, same for Vi, Jinx was all over the place. First, she has her hallucinations, then other times she doesn't. Like, she didn't even have. Isha was a plot device. She was a plot device. Like, if she wasn't there, season 2 would have been much better if Jinx embraced her role as Jinx, being the new crime boss of Zaun, and run the place.
The justification being little more than, I've got nothing to lose, I guess. Her changing relationship with Vi is similarly confusing. Once we reach episode 5, Vi is up to 3 betrayals and 1 attempted murder when it comes to Jinx, and yet Jinx goes out of her way, putting her own life at risk to tell Vi that Vander's alive. The only time they address the severe pain they've inflicted on one another is when they get into their silly sister fight. One time I punched my sister in the arm and she cried in her room for 10 minutes. I think it'd be pretty hard for us to make up if I attempted to kill her. The issue of Jinx and Vi quickly becoming normal sisters points to a larger problem: the rushed nature of Jinx's redemption arc and her transformation after meeting Isha. This little gremlin has inspired depths of sorrow and rage among Arcane fans beyond what you could imagine. Isha is often an emotional character to discuss, especially considering her tragic end, so as much as I hate when YouTubers do this, I'll just cover my butt real quick and remind you this is only my opinion. If you felt moved by Isha's inclusion, that's great, but I am a cold, unfeeling woman with a black heart, and I will not be fooled by the writer's attempts to distract me with cute children. To give the writers credit, Jinx's relationship with Isha as a catalyst for her
Yeah, it would have been much. Isha shouldn't have been in the show. It would have been much better. Because one, what does she really give to Jinx? Making her feel like she's an older sister, with her Isha being like a powder to her Vi. And then she just gets killed off. And then she's forgotten. Like, no one mentions her ever again. Nobody doesn't even mention her at the like, Isha who?
for her healing is not inherently flawed and could be an impactful direction for her character. This story trope was well done with Vander and Silco. Unfortunately, the way that Jinx and Isha's relationship develops leaves Isha feeling like a plot device to move Jinx from character beat to character beat. Throughout episode 2, Jinx and Isha do little more than exist in the same space. Isha immediately takes to Jinx, despite her being obviously unstable and likely frightening to a young girl, and Jinx seems unbothered, something along the lines of, "This kid seems cute, I guess." By the end of Jinx's fight with Vi in episode 3, it becomes obvious that Jinx wants to die and she wants Vi to be the one who killed her, as some kind of twisted reconciliation to their relationship. She gets visibly upset when Isha intervenes, and expresses a sense of frustrated despair when Vi and Caitlyn relent because of Isha. Then, episode 4 opens with Jinx and Isha in a loving sisterly relationship, giving us no explanation beyond time skip, time to crank it. But Callie, you ask, a spark of rebellion burning in your eyes, isn't this the same as Jinx and Silco? Is there anything so undoing as a daughter? To that I say, fair point, looking upon you with pride. The writers repeatedly make this comparison in episode 4, as Jinx reflects about this to Isha as well as during her conversation with the Silco chair. But this is a simplification of the effect Jinx had on Silco. Jinx served a very specific purpose in Silco's life. She was the first person that he cared about enough that he was willing to protect her over advancing the cause of Zaun, mainly because she harbored the same pain of betrayal that he did. Jinx did not make Silco altruistic or heal any of the resentment he held towards Topside or towards Vander. At the beginning of episode 9, Silco tells Rennie as she's actively mourning her dead son that, "At least, we have the solace of knowing he died fighting for our cause." Silco, he doesn't know what the cause is, he's 9. Although Silco does perform an act of sacrificial love in refusing to hand over Jinx, he still maintains his bitterness and cruelty towards the world, telling her they can all burn and everyone betrays us, as well as trying to kill Vi. Jinx became more valuable to Silco than Zaun because he had such a close connection to her, but he still maintained many of his core issues and often projected these struggles onto her. And so, the show's continuous comparison of Jinx and Isha's relationship to Silco and Jinx's relationship as a justification for how Jinx could jump from suicidal ideation to being remarkably well adjusted rings hollow. That's not even considering that it took Silco an entire season of on-screen transformation to reach that point, while Jinx's transformation is off-screen. What's most frustrating to me is how it oddly romanticizes Jinx and Silco's bond. I'm hard-pressed to find anything productive about their relationship. The man kidnapped and tried to kill her father, ordered Marcus to kill Vi, and raised her to be a mass murderer, even if Silco was the only one who truly understood her. There's a clear distinction between showing someone unconditional love and teaching them to embrace the most destructive aspects of themselves rather than heal from their trauma. Still, I don't want to diminish the nuance of how Season 1 depicts Jinx and Silco, and I can appreciate how it goes beyond being a one-sided evil dad dynamic. Anyway, Jinx and Isha are perfect and instantly solve each other's problems just by being together. The fact that Jinx is able to nonchalantly speak to Isha about her past identity as Powder and declare that Jinx is dead is a leap. The writers took what could have been a challenging and engaging journey for Jinx to accept herself, as well as make strides towards being a force of love rather than destruction, and put it in a time skip, with a child character that has no clear motivation beyond I like Jinx. To that point, I'm concerned that a 10-year-old girl wants to be just like a terrorist who processes her trauma by committing acts of mass violence, but this is cute sister bonding, I guess. This is why Isha's death had me legit stone-faced, without any explanation as to why Jinx would take on the burden of protecting Isha when she's in such an apathetic mental state that she literally says she wants to watch the world burn. Or any demonstration as to how someone as volatile as Jinx could properly care for a child, the relationship is very difficult to get invested in beyond, that's cute, I guess. Anyway, we're blowing up Isha, oh the misery, roll credits. With Isha's death comes another dramatic character change for Jinx, as she is now at her lowest, most suicidal point we have seen her in the series. To the writer's credit, such an experience would be traumatic for Jinx in specifically painful ways, so this reaction doesn't feel that jarring for her character. On the other hand, this change feels strange in comparison to her reaction to Silco's death, where she seemed little more than aimless, still having enough of a will to live that she didn't just let Smeech finish her off during their street brawl in episode 2. Silco was such a huge and complex part of her life compared to Isha, and she, intentionally or not, murdered him. So I find it odd that Isha's death leaves her at literal rock bottom. This is all ignoring the fact that Vi now accepts Jinx and believes in her potential, something that she's been waiting for her whole life. But all hope is lost for Jinx, I guess, and oddly enough, Jinx's ending reinforces this message. This is where I run into my confusion with Jinx's character this season. For much of season 2, Jinx is honestly pretty chill and quickly begins her redemption arc, performing the heroic act of saving Zonites from Stillwater as early as episode 4, which actually put them in more danger considering that Warwick was rapidly approaching, but nobody's perfect. The writers never have her reflect on the ripple effect of damage she caused with her unprompted attack on the council and then abandoning Zon to suffer the consequences, beyond her infamous line that she didn't know Cassandra was in the council room. Aw, Jinx, we all know you would have been gleefully cackling if you knew the rocket was going to kill Caitlyn's mom. You hated her guts. Still, Act 2 continuously demonstrates that Jinx can heal and, most importantly, can exist with Vi in peace. She may feel responsible for Isha's death, but it was due to circumstances outside of her control, Jace's hammer time, not any internal flaw she needs to reconcile. Regardless of whether or not you believe Jinx should be punished, Vi is right in saying that Jinx has much potential for goodness in her, as the whole of Act 2 has demonstrated. Then we get to the final battle, and from Vi's point of view, Jinx essentially takes her own life as the I Want to Die Really Bad song plays in the background. A quick reminder that music is more than background noise and can significantly impact how your narrative is interpreted. If the deaths of Jinx, Jace, and Victor were supposed to be a heroic sacrifice and a way for them to right their wrongs, with Jinx finally saving her family and Jace and Victor undoing the damage caused by the anomaly, why play the song that has lyrics like I used to have strength but I ran out of hope, and maybe death is like falling asleep? If you read the lyrics to the full version of this song, you'll see the bridge and final chorus have a more hopeful message that better reflects Jinx's choice to take the high road. Instead, the show never plays this segment, and the parts they do play paint the image that Jinx's death is the only solution to her suffering. In summary, I am going crazy, tangent over. I understand that it's basically confirmed Jinx survived, but some of us viewers aren't that smart and had to go on Reddit to find that out. Beyond that, her fate is left so ambiguous that she may as well have died. Vi has to live with the guilt of being unable to save her sister or father once again, and we can only guess what Jinx is going to do to break the cycle of violence. Much like Vi, Jinx's journey feels rushed, unfocused, and self-contradictory. Her inner healing happens so quickly that it has nothing interesting to say about how someone as deeply damaged and distrustful as Jinx can cope with these issues, or make amends for the pain they've inflicted on others beyond get a dog. Even when the audience accepts that Jinx has overcome her bitterness and resentment towards everyone around her, the writers force her to needlessly needlessly suffer because of circumstances she couldn't control and then declare she is too broken to exist in normal society. As I described at the beginning of this section, Jinx earns her status as one of the most highly praised Arcane characters because her writing was nuanced and empathetic, yet detailed how she sank further into bitterness and paranoia instead of choosing a path of healing, with Season 1 ending on a poignantly tragic note. Season 2 speedruns the difficult task of a Jinx redemption arc by victimizing her, turning her social ineptitude into wacky humor, making Vi and Caitlyn act uncharacteristically cruel in comparison, and using Isha as a sacrificial lamb to gain sympathy from the audience. By the end, I'm not sure what the writers even want to say about Jinx. They didn't take the time to write a thought-provoking story that challenged us to believe in the redemption of a mass murderer, and instead shipped her off in a blimp because she was too complicated to handle.
Even though Vander sliced open his face and tried to kill him in the lake.
We love each other, really.
I hate resurrection tropes. I don't know if this is childhood trauma from watching a lot of shonen anime growing up and being burned one too many times, but I cannot think of a story where a character was resurrected and it felt satisfying. Still, as much as I don't want to let it taint my analysis of Vander in Season 2, I figured I'd at least be transparent about my bias. As a point in favor of the writers, the possibility of Vander turning into a shimmer-powered creature was hinted at in Season 1, with Silco locking him in a medical chair and inadvertently using him as a test subject when Vander was pushed to use Shimmer in order to save Vi. At the same time, we saw Vander die in Vi's arms, his death arguably having the most impact on the narrative. Him being revived not only cheapens the years of suffering Vi and Jinx endured, but it also raises lots of questions about the nature of life, death, and Shimmer that go unanswered. In Season 1, Shimmer was easily understood to be a steroid equivalent that gave people super strength, which could manifest in them becoming Hulk beasts if they took a huge dose at once, like with Deckard or Vander, or it could give their body immunity to survive painful operations, like with Jinx or Victor. Somehow, a mix of magic wolf corpses, singed blood, and Shimmer is able to turn Vander into a werewolf. It's a leap to take Shimmer from a stimulant to a catalyst for reanimating corpses, and what's even more confusing is how Vander's consciousness interacts with Warwick. Does connecting Vander's brain to a working heart bring his memories back like powering on a PC? Why does the wolf inside him start senselessly destroying anything and anyone around him at a drop of blood? Did Singe program that into him? And if so, why? How does Victor's healing magic interact with Vander's consciousness?
Okay. I do feel like, yeah, how they did it, Vander, and how they made Vander / work in Season 2. Okay, they could have used the body. Good. Now, just don't have the Vander part, have the Warwick part be the dominant part of him in Season 2. Kind of like how he is in the lore, from what I understand, because we don't really know how he was made. Plus, they kind of give you a hint, like, yep, he's named the Hound of the Underground. Hound of the Undercity, so yep, he's going to be Vander.
When it seemed he could mainly heal physical imperfections. Can Victor heal Jinx's schizophrenia? It just gets more absurd when you think about Singe's reason for doing all of this. Ah yes, I must merge a man's corpse with 2 magic wolves I found in a cave and make him a bloodthirsty monster. All for you, my dearest. So as much as I like to raise annoying, actually questions about League of Legends sci-fi magic, my main concern is how Vander's transformation into Warwick impacts the characters. It paints Singed as pointlessly cruel in his experiments, which is especially strange considering the show literally highlights him being able to resurrect the daughter he experimented on against her will as the one good to come out of all this suffering. Warwick feels like a stain on Vander's memory, using him like a meat puppet to facilitate a reunion between Vi and Jinx without adding anything interesting to his character. One of Arcane's strengths was how every character felt like a well-defined individual with compelling motivations, even if they were more of a plot device. Marcus, despite essentially being a professional pot stirrer, has a surprisingly haunting arc about arrogance and cowardice. And you can't help but feel heartbroken for Skye, the embodiment of female yearning, whose desire to advance the field of science because of her admiration for Victor gives her death real weight beyond a sacrificial lamb. In contrast, Vander has had the most horrifying thing imaginable happen to him, but we don't get to explore how this affects him on a character level. Someone who was committed to non-violence and defending the people of Zaun is now at the mercy of an alien presence in his mind, forced to watch helplessly as he massacres everything in sight. The writers leave this opportunity for interesting character drama on the floor, and he becomes little more than a protect the NPC quest to force Vi and Jinx to work together. We get a few flashbacks with Vander this season that end up doing more retroactive harm to his character than good. The reveal that Vander was very close with Felicia and her family, to the point that he served as a father figure to Vi before the bridge battle, cheapens his sacrifice. His decision to care for Vi and Powder feels less like...
Okay, I agree with that one. It would have been much better if this flashback wasn't even in season 2, because now it retcons everything from season 1. Like, yep, Vander and Zuko knew Powder and Vi's mom, they were friends, so that could have been fine. And then, they had kids, and season 1, from the way Zuko acted, he felt like, I don't know these kids. I'm gonna kill them. Like, and now, given another thing that we do, that Vander's the one who named Vi, and he was in their life in the flashback, that chips away their bond in season 1.
like an act of pure sacrificial love and more like an obligation. Even though it would have been cruel for him to neglect Vi and Powder, Vander didn't have any responsibility to these random kids who showed up on the bridge, and you could forgive him for not going the extra mile to raise them as his own. It made it all the more meaningful that he did the hard but right thing and made an active effort to heal his community after his failed revolution resulted in so many pointless deaths. But with the knowledge that Vander is basically Vi and Powder's uncle, it's almost as if he doesn't have a choice. He'd be completely heartless to abandon them after promising their mother he would care for them and being somewhat responsible for her death. Nothing interesting is added to his character by making him Warwick or by revealing his closeness with Vi and Powder's mother. Ultimately, bringing Vander back feels like little more than an excuse to manufacture drama, and it's disappointing to see one of the most effective mentor characters in fiction be reduced to a plot device.
I run the Undercity.
Sorry, Jermaine, that was your sandwich.
God!
Similar to Vander, Silco's involvement this season either retroactively harms his character or is only used to facilitate dramatic beats for other characters. One of the most contentious points of discussion from season 2 is the letter from Vander that Vi and Jinx discover in episode 5. And I don't really know why it's contentious because it's obviously stupid. A letter from Vander apologizing for trying to drown Silco would not solve the real issue, that their ideologies are in direct conflict with each other. As I talked about in my season 1 Silco analysis, Vander actually does apologize to Silco for drowning him in episode 3 of season 1, and it only further frustrates Silco. Even though he was angry for a time, Silco still respected Vander because what he did was proof that he was willing to take action based on what he believed, no matter how painful or cruel it was. It was when Vander became willing to work with enforcers, to bow to the whims of the enemy for the sake of peace, that Silco began to hate him. As he tells Vander, "You die for the cause, but you won't fight for one." For Silco, the ends justify the means, and he will make any sacrifice necessary to advance his cause. In his perspective, Vander wimped out after a few people died in their attempted uprising and was so scared of causing any more violence that he became ineffective. Unless Vander was willing to embrace Silco's utilitarian view, any attempt at an apology would only add salt to the wound. Episode 7's insistence that Silco and Vander's issue was simply one of learning to forgive is laughable, and cheapens the engaging ideological conflict these two had in season 1. Jinx's hallucination of Silco during her imprisonment in episode 8 is similarly ridiculous. To the writer's credit, I enjoyed this monologue in isolation, especially the comparison of a moral code to a cell we lock ourselves in. For someone like Silco, who viewed traditional ideas of good and evil as limiting and justified any action as long as it was a net positive for Zahn, this line was a creative way of capturing his worldview, delivered beautifully by the angelic pipes of Jason Spizak.
I guess I need to put this up to my mouth because right now I can't feel my hands.
But things quickly veer off the rails when the show uses Silco, the literal embodiment of bitterness and vengeance up to his final moments, to deliver the message that the cycle of violence only ends when you choose to walk away. It's hard to hear those words come out of Silco's mouth and not laugh. Even if this is not supposed to be an accurate depiction of Silco, why have the writers turned Jinx's debilitating hallucinations into character development ghosts? It's even stranger how this message plays out in Jinx's character. At first, she takes it to mean she's too broken to heal and tries to take her own life, then she takes it to mean she's too broken to have a healthy relationship with Vi and goes off to live her truth in a hot air balloon, rather than contribute something good to the world as a way to counteract the damage she caused. Even with his reduced presence in season 2, Silco looms over the narrative like a bad omen, the writers misunderstanding their own character or going out of their way to romanticize him as a positive influence on Jinx. They reduced a compelling and nuanced antagonist to a mouthpiece for the writers to lecture about how forgiveness is good and violence is bad, contorting his once complex character to fit these simplistic messages.
What have we done?
What have we done?
If you felt Jace's behavior in season 1 was erratic, hold on to your hammers because you can honestly never predict what this man is going to do this season. Still, this raises an interesting point. Wasn't one of Jace's key flaws in season 1 his impulsiveness and willingness to compromise his principles? While he was inconsistent, there was a clearly displayed logic to his inconsistency. Whenever Jace did something that contradicted the beliefs he claimed to hold, it was because he was following the advice of an influential figure in his life without question. Mel successfully convinced him to back down on his mission to root out corruption by arguing that making friends with counselors was the best way to secure support for Hextech. Jace's most impulsive council decisions of firing Heimerdinger and raiding Silco's mines only come after scenes showing Mel and Ambessa manipulating him. This is why Jace's defining moment at the end of season 1 is giving a big old frick you frickin' fricks to the council and acting based on his personal conviction that a Hextech war must be stopped at all costs, caused by his first-hand experience during the Silco mine raid. As I said in my season 1 analysis, there's a difference between a character being frustrating and annoying. Because the writers kept the audience on the same page and demonstrated how other characters exploited Jace's fear of losing control to cause him to act in ways that conflicted with his beliefs, his behavior was frustrating rather than annoying. This gave him a well-defined and engaging journey to follow, demonstrating how even a rational person with good intentions can let themselves be driven by impulses and bad actors if they don't think critically. So it's a bad sign that episode 1 of season 2 begins with Jace expectedly being staunchly against an invasion with Hextech weaponry, only to rush towards the conclusion where he makes Hextech weapons for Caitlyn's task force. The major argument the show makes to facilitate this change is that the memorial attack scared Jace, and assumedly he saw that Hextech weapons were what saved the day and concluded they were a necessary evil. I find this explanation to be shaky because 1, Ambessa's troops turned the tide in the battle and all they had were spears, and 2, both Mel and Victor, the biggest influences in Jace's life, are vehemently opposed to Hextech weaponry. The only person who could have convinced him is Caitlyn, but in their last conversation we see, she also explicitly tells him that Hextech weaponry is not the answer. When everything we are shown opposes the idea that Jace would create Hextech weapons, it feels less like there is a cause and effect to him going back on his principles, and more like he's acting out of character without explanation. Because there's no real transition scene, this isn't an interesting examination of how Jace could be convinced to use Hextech weapons after being so traumatized by inadvertently killing a child that he swore against it, along with the survivor's guilt over Victor's death further motivating him to respect his friend's wishes. Instead, it feels contrived and cheapens his growth up to this point, a sign that the writers are cranking it when it comes to Jace's character development in this rushed season. Still, even if Jace turning back on everything he learned in season 1 is rushed, unlike my issues with Vi and Jinx, the writers have a clear vision for Jace's character this season. It's time for Jace to reckon with his part in creating Hextech, to take responsibility and fully commit to undoing the harm he's caused by misusing his political power. This is a natural continuation of his journey in the prior season, a process that he started by negotiating a peace deal and preparing to resign from the council. But as episode 1 has shown, there's always a chance he can fall back into his old habits. Jace and Victor's conversation in episode 2 builds a strong foundation for this journey. Jace merging Victor with the Hex Corps is a well-founded decision based on what we know of his character in season 1, despite the fact he promised Victor he would destroy it. Unlike his endorsement of Hextech weaponry, where he took an undetermined amount of time off screen to come to that conclusion, Jace was forced to make a snap decision whether or not to save his friend's life. It's also implied he didn't know the Hex Corps killed Skye, considering episode 9 of season 1 makes a point of showing Victor hiding Skye's notes under his shoulder. I can imagine that if he knew this, Jace would be more wary of using the Hex Corps. Arguably, it makes sense that in the heat of the moment and without a full understanding of the gravity of what he's doing, an action-oriented character like Jace would break his promise to Victor if he thought it would save his life. During During their discussion, Jace dismisses Victor's objections and tries to paint himself as being backed into a corner, in a way that's reminiscent of their discussion about Hextech weapons from the previous season. Unfortunately, Victor nopes out before they can delve deeper into this issue or any larger issues either one should have strong opinions on. How Piltover should respond to Jinx's attack, or if Hextech weapons should be used, just to name a few. Jace literally watches in silence as Victor slowly hobbles away to an undisclosed location. No further questions or concerns about what he plans to do or how his new powers work. Jace fails to properly address his issues with Victor as well as Heimerdinger, and as an extension, his journey to rectify the damage he did with his irresponsible use of Hextech is confusing and unengaging. Jace and Heimerdinger are back to being buddies almost instantly, never confronting their falling out or exploring how their actions contributed to the current nightmare Piltover and Zahn are in. By the time Jace gets to talk to Victor again, neither of them are in their right minds, with Victor becoming Hex Jesus under the influence of the Arcane, and Jace suffering from alternate dimension mental illness. Their dynamic quickly becomes dramatic, lacking the thoughtful discussions they used to have on political power and the use of technology, instead turning into generic evil world domination robot versus individualistic hero dialogue. By the end of this season, I can count the number of scenes Jace and Victor share on my hand, and they all follow the same confusing pattern. They start by raising interesting points of discussion about their conflict.
We were wrong. It's not as bad as
It killed this guy, Jace.
You've given Hextech to the people?
I used to think this natural healing handbook was out of my budget until I saw this secret sale. Since a lot of people say
As we always promised we would. Your mind has become rigid, Jace. Fear clouds your judgment.
Refuse to properly address the other's point of view.
My place was always here in the lab with you. We'll make this right. Together.
We have to end it, Victor. We have to.
You seem different.
This is your obsession. Everything you've done to these people, you did alone.
Something gay happens.
It was affection that held us together.
I thought you were done with Hextech. And me.
Let us instead do this once again as partners.
And then Victor leaves or explodes.
Where are you going?
Goodbye, Jace.
I'm sorry too.
Jace making amends with Victor should be a crucial part of addressing his past mistakes. Their relation.
Okay, yes, that was it. Season 2, they weren't given as much screen time, and given how we knew from season 2, when Jace went to the future, like, all right, met future Victor, like, all right, help me stop myself, because if you won't do that, the easiest way was not the, oh, I'm back, let me blast them into smithereens, instead of waiting until the end season finale, like, oh, I promised I'll help you get better. Like, no, first time he comes back, see Victor, okay, hammer time, blast, boom, gone. My boy, weren't you just trying to help him? It would have been much better if you just went talk to him instead of blasting him first.
Relationship was the interpersonal anchor for the show's larger debate on the corrupting nature of power and technology. Instead, the writer's main vehicle for teaching Jace the error of his ways and the catalyst for his unyielding determination to destroy Hextech is throwing him in a hole for a few weeks. While I love the haunting atmosphere of the apocalypse dimension and find the scene of Jace exploring the aftermath of the battle to be effective, ultimately, the way this experience changes him only hurts his character. Jace suffering in the cave and playing an average Mario Maker level doesn't force him to make a difficult choice that reveals what he believes. It tells us that he feels very guilty about Hextech and wants to stop it, which is a pretty basic emotion to spend half of an entire episode conveying. Everything he does after this point, chronologically, not episode-wise, is a huge deviation from the character we know and extremely far removed from his usual well-intentioned yet poorly thought-out decision-making. But the writers gotta crank it so we don't get any time to understand his new psychology beyond he's gone insane, I guess. The Time Lord Victor plot twist only muddies the waters further. Once Jace reaches the top of the Hex Gates during the final final battle, he decides to let Victor enter him into the hive mind because he recognizes it as being similar to the statue in the alternate dimension. He also tells Vi, Caitlin, and Mel that they're supposed to lose the fight, and is suspiciously slow in deactivating the Hexgate engine, despite it being the deciding factor in whether Victor achieves the glorious evolution or not. It all implies a level of predestination, that future Victor knew what would happen in this timeline where he gave Jace the acceleration rune and explained this to him. Because of this, I have no idea what Jace's actions post-alternate dimension adventure say about his character or his beliefs. He never reflects on killing Salo, Victor, and causing the deaths of an entire commune of poor people. Was this all part of the one way to save his timeline? With how absurdly evil Victor becomes, Jace appears heroic by comparison rather than because of any personal growth. And the only time his actions are questioned by the narrative is when he's neglectful towards Mel in episode 8, as the writers have him apologize to her in the next scene. I grew more and more annoyed with Jace this season as I watched the writers fumble the execution of his growth. In his last moment of the show, where he finally got to have a real conversation with Victor about their conflict, where the writers could have had him reflect on his actions in a way that gave some sort of unifying message to his confusing arc, they face-planted into the finish line. Victor begins with a valid point. He posits that humanity shares the desire to create better lives, that we all just want ourselves and our loved ones to be happy and healthy. The real issue is that we are flawed beings with limited perspectives and an inability to think practically, allowing fear and mistrust to prevent us from being unified. I mean, he basically summarized season 1. In response, Jace tells Victor that despite his desire to cure his supposed weaknesses, like his limp and disease, he was never broken, and that there is beauty in imperfections. Jace, that was really sweet, but what does this have to do with literally anything? 1, this is a vague statement that doesn't make an argument for why humans deserve free will, or address Victor's point that humans can't be trusted to make the right decisions. When you take a moment to think about the hundreds of instances in Arcane where a misguided decision resulted in horrible consequences, the statement, "there is beauty in imperfections," comes off more like feel-good fluff than anything profound. In general, Season 2 struggles with the signature Arcane one-liners. Season 1 did a great job of putting complex ideas into simple terms, while Season 2 makes the mistake of putting simple ideas into overly complex terms.
Weapons can't be unmade, and they are always used.
Nobody wins in war, Vi. In the pursuit of great, we fail to do good.
She oinked poison in your ear and you just ate it.
Choice is false. It is how we clothe and forgive the baser instincts that spur us to division.
In my experience, no one in power is innocent.
2, the way Jace speaks about Victor and his illness feels like the writers are misunderstanding their own character. Victor was confident in his own worth and capability regardless of his condition. The reason he became desperate to cure himself was because his illness put a time limit on what he could accomplish, and he believed he played a crucial role in advancing Hextech far enough that it could save the Undercity. It wasn't that he thought, I am inherently less valuable as a person because I'm disabled and need to be fixed. He only thought, man, I wish I didn't have cancer when I'm trying to end poverty. Additionally, Jace never respected Victor less because he was disabled, so this wasn't a flaw he needed to correct. Jace's prejudice towards Zonite was more of an issue between them, but this goes unaddressed. He even ignorantly implies Victor's issue was one of self-love, rather than acknowledge how Topside's poor management of the Undercity caused Victor to unfairly suffer from chronic pain and terminal illness. Any interesting character drama or discussions about power and technology that could be had between these two quickly falls apart after this point. Echo spikes the Z-Drive, Jace hugs Victor so he can get the Time Lord Victor lore drop, and then we get the J-Vig Hexplosion incident of 2024. Oh, the misery, roll credits. Jace has been through so much in Season 2, yet by the time we reach the final scene, it feels like he hasn't gone through any personal growth. His sometimes erratic decision-making has been dialed up to insanity for this season, jumping from his usual errors in judgment to a murderous rampage, only to go back to giving Victor a big ol' hug for the finale. The writers have to rush past his defining moment so quickly that the audience doesn't get to sit with the consequences of his actions like in Season 1, leaving what could have been an interesting journey for Jace to feel underdeveloped and confusing.
Victor Nation, how are we feeling?
Of all the legends of the League at the end of Season 1, Victor's fate was the most unclear. He's a champion in the game, so he's going to survive, but like, there's no way, just look at him. With the foreshadowing we got in Season 1 and League fans' knowledge of his character in the game, a full embrace of Hextech and transformation into a cyborg creature was the most likely path for his character. Again, with my Nietzsche comparison, Victor's hex core experiments in Season 1 employ a lot of body horror, alluding to the idea he will shed his humanity in order to evolve to a higher state of being. So yes, I was excited when they shoved him in the gooby cocoon and forced him to crawl his way out, fully metamorphosed into a purple eldritch entity. What would he do in reaction to the attack on the council?
Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. David Costa, the Dean and CEO here at Robert Kennedy College in Zurich, Switzerland. And I'm here today to introduce the University of Cambria online master programs. You can now complete your British master degree entirely online in just 1 year. We offer a number of specializations, such as our Executive MBA, our MBA Artificial Intelligence, MBA International Healthcare Management, MBA International Relations and Diplomacy, and also MSc in International Business and Computer Science, MSc Data Analytics, Master of Laws, International Business Law, and many more. Request our course catalog and get started today.
Jace's betrayal and Piltover's invasion with Hextech weaponry. How far would he now be willing to go in the pursuit of progress, of empowering the Undercity against their increasingly violent oppressors? Well, it's actually a pretty simple answer. Leave, become Jesus, chill in a commune for a bit, die, decide enslaving humanity is the only option, I guess, then die again. Confusingly, Victor's loss of humanity and embrace of the glorious evolution involves him living in full service of the Undercity and starting a peaceful commune where anyone is welcome. The writers failed to establish the gradual buildup of dread and danger that they expertly pulled off in Season 1 with his brief turn to the dark side. For this to be the start of Victor's transformation into an evil god, his actions are oddly benign and don't reflect that he's embracing rationality to the point of neglecting his humanity. He goes out of his way to try to heal Vander because he's so moved by his dream for Zahn, even though the rational choice would be to keep him away from the commune rather than risk the lives of many for the sake of one person. Again, Victor refuses to use Vander to strengthen his own power, even when Singe points out that doing so puts the whole commune at risk of death. There's nothing overly rational or utilitarian about Victor's actions prior to his god transformation, with most of his choices actually portraying him as empathetic to his own detriment. He's not a compelling villain for the show's finale because his journey feels poorly developed and rushed. If the show included more warning signs about the danger of Victor's pragmatic thinking, maybe by having him turn people away if they weren't a net benefit to the commune or justify unethical experiments for the sake of progress, it would be more believable for him to decide that working with Ambessa is a necessary evil to complete the glorious evolution. Otherwise, his change from claiming he will only evolve the willing to participating in Ambessa's excessive bloodshed and enslaving humanity is underdeveloped and unengaging as a result. He quickly becomes so absurdly evil that it's hard to seriously consider his beliefs, with the writers having nothing interesting to say about what could cause a person to go this insane with power besides, that's how the Arcane be, I guess. Season 2 Victor's obsession with the concepts of fate and free will is a leap from his character in Season 1, if not contradictory. His conversation with Singe in Episode 6 and with Jace in Episode 9, the one where they're in the Hexgate engine room, indicates that he believes everything that occurs is predestined to a degree and choice is a social construct, I guess. The issue is, time and time again, Victor's conflict with Jace indicates that he values the idea idea of free will very highly. Jace is the one who consistently insists he doesn't have a choice as a weak defense for his poor decisions, something that Victor criticizes him for precisely because he believes he is choosing temporary pleasures, public affirmation, political power, mom you know, over advancing the Hextech project. He even maintains this attitude in Season 2 when he ends his partnership with Jace because Jace chose to save Victor's life instead of destroying the Hex Core like he promised, as well as giving Jace multiple chances to choose to work with him in the Glorious Evolution. On that note, major conflicts between Victor and Jace, like using Hextech to empower the Undercity, the price of progress, or the best usage of political influence, go unexplored in favor of a philosophical debate that the writers honestly don't seem that interested in. I'll keep this brief since I already touched on this in my analysis of Jace, but in general, Jace makes assertions rather than arguments against Victor, and Victor never challenges Jace to make a compelling case for why he
All right, I'm back. Oh, okay. I figured. I didn't really know if it was you. So at least I know. Okay, I am part of your server, so that's good. So whenever you do the announcement of you're doing to make your animation on the server, I wouldn't mind looking at it. But I'm back now. Let me try and continue this video.
why humans deserve free will or the value of suffering. Inversely, Victor makes vague statements.
Victor. Did you chase yet? Okay. Now, Victor, from what I understand from the lore, he's more a machine herald guy. So from what I researched, I think I would have preferred him going to that route than how he looks in Season 2. where he's more like a god-like figure.
Statements about reason and emotion without properly defining what he means when he uses those terms, which is especially confusing since much of his actions this season seem to be driven by sacrificial love, and Jace never points out how extreme pragmatism could be harmful to humanity. Like Jace, by the finale, Victor is nearly unrecognizable from the character we knew in Season 1, but the writers did not take us on a compelling journey to get him to this point. His well-defined goals of helping his people achieve equality, building his legacy, and using technology as a nonviolent means of enacting social change are replaced with poorly communicated philosophical ponderings. He spends much of the season without any clear plan, following the path of magic footprints and doing generally nice things for people, only to be embarrassingly unprepared when Piltover shows up on his doorstep with a bunch of weapons, and bafflingly allowing Jace to wander around the commune with his hammer after he just killed Sallow.
Poor Sallow.
Most people over 40 will enter 2026 still using ChatGPT like Google. Don't be one of them.
That isn't Jace.
Victor and Jace are just plain confusing this season. The development and eventual reconciliation of their conflict is a far cry from the nuanced relationship they had in the past season, which challenged the viewer to understand both of their points of view rather than paint one as the hero and the other as an evil robot overlord.
The Defender of Tomorrow? Echo? Oh, okay. Jace.
Season 2 tells a story of war between Piltover and Zaun, the escalation of violence between the cities as a consequence of the failures of both sides. So naturally, the writers decide to send Mel, the most influential leader of Piltover, off on a side quest to unlock cool witch powers. Really, there's not a lot to say about Mel's arc in Season 2 because so much interesting material for her character is left on the table for a standard Chosen One storyline. Mel's intricate psychology and moral complexity is what made her memorable. Even though I have some complaints about her development in Season 1, her internal war between acting as the self-preserving politician she was raised to be and acting based on her morality was exciting to watch, especially with how it manifested in her relationships with Jace and Ambessa. And yet, Season 2 fails both the political and interpersonal aspects of her character. Mel is embarrassingly ineffective as a social strategist this season. The most she does is hire a cat girl to spy on Sallow, and even then, Ambessa clocks Lest as a fed every time and tells her to leave before she can hear anything useful. Mel makes little effort to establish an alliance with Shula, even though she appears more moderate and open to a peaceful solution. She's notably the first counselor shown raising her hand in support of the treaty after Mel in episode 9. Mel also ignores the ticking time bomb that is Caitlin, watching helplessly as she declares she's leading an invasion with the Hextech weapons she got from Jace, all without the council's approval. Allura really is the MVP, gathering all kinds of intelligence for Mel, yet even during their meetings, Mel says little more than, "We'll have to do something about this, I guess." Having failed in all of her efforts to bring any sense of peace, Mel is taken out of play in episode 3 and put in Black Rose jail, isolated from basically everything that made her character interesting up to this point. Even many Season 2 defenders admit the Black Rose plotline is poorly explained and a disappointing use of Mel's character.
Yep, I agree with that very much. Because Season 1 was good, and Season 2, Mel's basically gone for most of the plot until like the last 3 episodes. I think it would have been much better if Mel was still in Piltover, so at least we could get more interactions between Ambessa, Mel, and Jason Mel, instead of her being shipped away to some random place by the Black Rose for the entire season until the last few episodes. And then she's a mage. Sorry, she's a mage. That's okay, I guess, but she kind of learned her magic abilities way off screen and way too quick.
As I said in my world-building analysis of Season 2, you can't throw so much magic BS into a plotline that the viewers don't have a functional understanding of what's happening, because that will make it near impossible for them to engage with any of the emotional beats you're trying to hit. If you have to keep pausing the show to scour the depths of Reddit, something is wrong. After going on a boring and confusing magic side quest, the writers finally let Mel out of her box, giving us at least some hope that Mel will have to wrestle with an engaging internal struggle. She's essentially given an ultimatum by LeBlanc to join them in stopping Ambessa from bringing about the apocalypse. Even though logically, Mel has little reason to trust the evil witches that kidnapped her, killed her brother, and generally want to bring about the end of her bloodline so they can rule Noxus, this at least presents Mel with an interesting moral dilemma of whether or not she will work with her enemies and kill her own mother for the greater good. Except this isn't season 1, where Mel had layers of moral complexity and well-developed nuance. Now the writers are letting her play on easy mode and make Ambessa so ridiculously evil that she'd almost be psychotic to let her live. This main character syndrome for Mel starts to rear its head in episode 8 when she reunites with Jace. She quietly hints that she wants Jace to ask what happened to her, but he completely misses this signal. I mean, I think this is average behavior for a man in his 30s, let alone one who has severe PTSD from being thrown in a hole and tortured for an unclear period of time, but apparently this was bad enough that it warranted one of the only apologies Jace gives in the show. Even more baffling is Mel's response when Jace confronts her about hiding the true reason they survived the attack, as well as having ulterior motives for beginning their relationship. This one moment where Mel gets to confront her flaw of using deception to stay in control rather than trusting the people who care about her is quickly dashed. Instead of explaining that her love for Jace is real, even if it started from a selfish place, she defends her actions as a wise investment. Then the side piece arrives, so Jace blows them up again, and Mel gets a chance to vent about her mommy issues. In a desperate attempt to add clarity to her confusing arc, the writers have Jace give an on-the-nose explanation of the lesson Mel is supposed to learn, that she can take control of her destiny and she will never be a passenger. I understand what the writers are getting at, how Mel's inferiority complex caused by being banished and desire to prove herself as a competent leader encouraged her Machiavellian way of ruling. But this interpretation victimizes Mel and erases any of the moral complexity she had in the past season. Again, Mel is easily allowed to be the good guy when she decides, hey, I'm gonna check up on me mom, only to discover that Ambessa has literally allied herself with an evil god and acquired an undead army to take over the world. I'll go more in depth on this in my Ambessa analysis, but her absurd levels of villainy this season removes any of the nuance in her relationship with Mel that made their conflict engaging. Ambessa used to pose a genuine counter-argument to Mel's methods of diplomacy and negotiation, being someone that would only use violence to establish a strict sense of order, rather than the crazed warlord she is now. Mel's attempts to convince Ambessa to stand down make her look naive and incompetent. This isn't anywhere near as interesting as the finale of season 1, where she thoughtfully considered her options and realized granting the Undercity independence was a worthwhile risk to avoid an all-out war. You can't negotiate or use diplomacy with someone who is so far gone that they're willing to mind control the human race. Anyway, who cares about Mel's growth as a leader? Now she's a legend of the League. She doesn't have time for political duties. We'll let Jace handle the council meetings, and I know he's clearly disturbed and mentally unstable, but I'm sure he'll inspire nothing but confidence in Piltover and Zaun's leadership. The resolution to Mel and Ambessa's relationship only further confuses the message of her journey. Mel hands Ambessa over to LeBlanc to finish her off, but then she decides she doesn't want LeBlanc to finish her mother off and does a Super Saiyan for it. Then Ambessa just dies anyway. But before she dies, she looks up at Mel, smiles, and says, "You are the wolf." Back in episode 8 of season 1, Ambessa tells a young Mel that she can not only be the fox, and she must also be the wolf if she wants to be an effective leader. Mel's lack of ruthlessness is what caused Ambessa to banish her, and is what motivated Mel's pursuit of power through negotiation as a way to defy this identity her mother tried to force upon her. So why do the writers end Mel's "you will never be a passenger" arc with her mom proudly smiling at her and declaring that she has become what she always wanted her to be? Who cares? We gotta crank it. Now Mel's sailing off to and we never get to know how she reacted to Jace's death, what role she played in establishing the new council, or how she feels inheriting her mother's position beyond a look of mild constipation. That pretty effectively captures the issues with Mel's writing this season. So much happens to her, and yet she seems pretty much unchanged or unchallenged by it. The writers strangely took the character that would likely have the most interesting role to play in the war and put her in a box for most of the season, forsaking everything that made her fun to watch in the first place.
I don't.
Daughter's wedding is in a month. I don't want us to look like Beauty and the Beef.
Darling, relax. We have plenty of time. Remember,
despite the fact that Caitlyn's character swings from one extreme to the other pretty frequently this season, it seems like the writers had the clearest idea of what direction they wanted to take her. Assumedly, the intention with Caitlyn was to write the standard grief-driven vengeance arc, which always causes positive reactions among fans and is very easy to execute. She may be the biggest victim of rushed pacing this season, as the writers are unable to properly develop what could have been a compelling journey for her character. By the end, no one's really sure who Caitlyn is or what she believes, so the writers writers kind of shrug their shoulders and say she's too tired to be mad anymore. Turning Caitlin into a ruthless military officer who is willing to use powerful weaponry and toxic gas on the people of the Undercity to get revenge on Jinx is a difficult task, considering that was basically everything she stood against in the prior season. I mean, her character is literally built around the fact she's an empath, the show demonstrating on multiple occasions that she goes out of her way to treat criminals with humanity and respect. Still, Caitlin has a strong sense of right and wrong, making it difficult for her to understand someone like Jinx, who from her perspective is nothing more than a force of senseless violence. Combine that with Caitlin's guilt about not taking the shot and now having to carry on her mother's legacy, this lays a strong foundation for someone as empathetic as Caitlin to want justice. To what lengths she will go in pursuing vengeance is up to the writers to develop, but instead of using Caitlin's arc to explore how even a good person can be driven to hatred and violence, she's rushed from character beat to character beat with little time to explore the factors behind her changing psychology. Episode 1 effectively brings us into her mental space following the attack on the council, communicating the layers of grief, guilt, and weight of her mother's legacy. But even early on, minor red flags start popping up, starting with Caitlin infamously springing the badge on Vi. Considering that Marcus personally betrayed Caitlin and she herself discovered that much of the Force was bought out by Silco, why would she still maintain this level of trust in them? Her argument that this method would be safer than a vigilante mission like Vi suggests also doesn't hold up when you realize their task force is made of 3 low-ranking cops who are so useless that Vi and Caitlin ultimately agreed to leave them behind for the battle with Jinx. Caitlin has always displayed a level of ignorance when it comes to the dynamic between Piltover and Zahn, but her asking Vi to become a cop is a leap, especially after she spent the entirety of Season 1 learning to understand Vi's perspective. The Memorial attack understandably sets Caitlin on edge and fuels her fire for vengeance. I appreciate that unlike other characters, the writers give us a scene showing us how Caitlin is processing what just happened, but I take issue with their on-the-nose effort to portray her as an anti-Zahn racist, calling the people of the Undercity as a whole animals with Vi standing right in front of her. Listen, you can make Caitlin as racist as you want, you just need to give a thoughtful justification as to why, because this is a stark departure from her character. Throughout Season 1, the writers consistently contrast how Caitlin treats people as individuals against the dehumanization and othering that's ingrained in Piltover's culture. She wants to maintain her friendship with Jace even when he's labeled as a criminal by the council. She's visibly disturbed at how nonchalantly the prison warden discusses the guard's abuse of Vi, and she shows empathy towards Huck. The Memorial attack was clearly done by a small group of Silco's men. It may fuel Caitlin's desire for vengeance against Jinx, but it's a leap to say that she wouldn't mentally separate them from the rest of the Undercity like she always has and instead embrace a bigoted mindset. Anyway, somehow Caitlin convinces Vi and Jace to go back on their convictions, and somehow she prepares an invasion with Hextech weaponry behind the council's back. Related to the issue of the racist Caitlin jump scare in episode 1, her releasing the Grey into Zahn with detailed knowledge of its harmful effects is presented as she's doing this now, I guess, rather than thoughtfully developed. I don't buy the explanation that this would only affect the Chem Barons. Even if you can control the gas to some extent, it's still gas and will inevitably leak into the air that innocent people have to breathe. Caitlin wanting to kill Jinx is not an interesting explanation for why she would be willing to put innocent people in the crossfire. This issue gets exponentially worse during Caitlin and Vi's argument after they failed to kill Jinx. Caitlin's anger over losing Jinx again makes sense for her character, but Vi stated multiple times before the fight that she was willing to kill Jinx and nearly went through with it before Isha stepped in. Why would Caitlin come to the conclusion that Vi is more loyal to her tribe than Caitlin by saying, "It's her"? Jinx's blood in your veins. Caitlin's change from hating Jinx to hating anyone from the Undercity isn't executed in a compelling way, mainly because the writers are cranking it. They're rushing through what could have been a thoughtful look into how someone can let one painful experience paint how they view an entire group of people, instead saying, being sad makes you racist, I guess. Anyway, somehow the most powerful leaders of Piltover agree that Caitlin, a 23-year-old enforcer who hasn't even succeeded in her primary goal of capturing Jinx and de-escalating the conflict, should be dictator perpetuo. The time skip only further alienates the audience as to why Caitlin has changed her core values in the ways she has. Episode 4 infamously opens with her and Maddie sleeping together, with little explanation for their relationship beyond she's rebounding. More confusing than lesbian hijinks is the fact that Caitlin expresses deep admiration for Ambessa that indicates a maternal relationship, to the point that she smiles at Maddie comparing her to Ambessa, only to act very distant and distrustful towards her in the next scene. Caitlin oddly criticizes Ambessa for having Rictus instigate violence and argues that arrests require cause. But the last we saw of her in Act 1
Alright, I'm back. Let me see if I can finish this off.
1, she believed anyone who was allied with Silco or Jinx could and should be arrested. In most real-life cases, being affiliated with a designated terrorist organization is enough to warrant an arrest. So it's strange that Caitlyn, who hates Jinx so much she became racist against the entire Undercity in episode 3, would now take the moral high ground about arresting someone who is clearly a member of a terrorist organization.
Arrests require cause. Cuff him.
I feel like I'm wasting my breath arguing this point because Caitlyn doesn't express any issues with Ambessa's actions after this scene, going back to being cartoonishly evil as she threatens to lock Singe in a rubber room with rats, then contemplates shooting him at point-blank range after learning he invented heroin. All of Caitlyn's scenes up until episode 6 reinforce how she models Ambessa's form of military dictatorship, ranging from a passive participant to active instigator. And then she assaults Vi, the two engage in flirty banter rather than attempt to hash out any of their deep-rooted issues, and she decides to betray Ambessa with no prior indication of inner conflict except for looks of mild constipation. Even one transitory scene could have helped make this change more engaging, maybe showing Caitlyn on a scouting mission in the commune where she sees the generosity of the people there and realizes how unjustified her hatred of the Undercity was. After this point, the feeling that the writers were maybe cranking it too hard with Caitlyn's turn to the dark side in Act 1 is now a bitter acceptance that they're simply deciding what her character is based on the needs of the scene, rather than developing a journey that explores how someone who lost themselves so deeply in hatred and vengeance can heal and atone for what they've done. Caitlyn's attempt to reconcile with Vi is about as compelling as Mel's response to Jace, and her long-awaited one-on-one with Jinx in episode 8 has her conclude, "I'm tired, so I'll forgive you." In some respects, I don't have an issue with this being the conclusion of Caitlyn's arc. It's a nuanced take on mercy, that you don't just forgive because it's the right thing to do, but so that you can heal and don't have to be ruled by the pain that was inflicted on you. The issue is, Caitlyn's character is so poorly defined this season that her decision to forgive Jinx is painfully unexplored and feels unearned, instead presented as, she's doing this now, I guess. Additionally, the writers ignore the fact that Caitlyn's decision not to put Jinx on trial isn't just a personal issue of forgiveness, considering that Jinx has killed multiple enforcers, attacked a government building, released a gas attack on the city, and initiated a mass prison break. It all goes to show how a lack of care from the writers or lack of properly allocated screen time can decimate Caitlyn's arc, Jinx's arc, the world building, and the overall themes in one scene. Unlike in the prior season where we saw how Caitlyn's relationship with Vi developed her more mature perspective on Topside and the Undercity, the writers changed Caitlyn's psychology from scene to scene, relying on the audience to fill in the blanks or even disregard scenes that serve as contradictory evidence. Caitlyn is given a lot more to do in season 2 than the prior season, lots of interesting material to work with, and yet most of her scenes are a waste of time, amounting to a rushed and confusing villain arc that has nothing interesting to say about how someone can be radicalized and then overcome their bigotry through forgiveness. I admire the writers' boldness and willingness to do something controversial with Caitlyn, but this overly packed season was not the time or place, leaving them to rely on the justification of she's sad to explain her arc instead of intricately developing her changing worldview like they did in season 1.
Maybe Arcane was the friends we made along the way.
The destruction of Heimerdinger's character this season was as swift and efficient as the Z-Drive prototype. This one is the most baffling case to me. I'll admit that with much of the main cast, my analysis is very critical, and I have some mercy for the writers knowing how many difficult character arcs they had to juggle. But Heimerdinger's arc is so straightforward on paper that I'm simply flabbergasted by how poorly executed it was. The direction for his character was the most clearly laid out by the finale of season 1, and yet the writers fumble each attempt at giving him something interesting to do, if not having him needlessly backtrack on his growth. Act 1 serves as a bad omen for the orange hairball. The writers lean too hard into his quirky old scientist side, shoehorning him into the role of comic relief and neglecting any opportunities to explore how he wrestles with the escalation of the conflict between Zahn and Piltover. His reconciliation with Jace is brushed over. He seemingly doesn't care that Victor has turned into a living embodiment of Hextech and is now wandering around the Undercity, and we get no indication as to how he feels about the attack on the council or his colleagues that died as a result. Every bad thing that Heimerdinger predicted would happen in season 1 has come to fruition. There's so much good material on the table to examine how he could maintain a hopeful spirit in spite of the grim circumstances, or reflect on the role he played in the worsening conflict and determine the best path forward. Instead, he has such a lighthearted attitude from the onset that I'm worried he's losing his grip on reality and it's time to put old Heimer out to pasture. Episode 7 only doubles down on this issue, with Heimerdinger passively accepting that he can't leave the alternate dimension despite knowing that Jason Echo could be in grave danger, as well as that the city he founded is suffering a bloody civil war. The writers are either poorly communicating or have completely misunderstood what they were getting at with.
Okay, I agree. Heimerdinger had the short end of the stick. In season 1, he was a good character, but in season 2, they overplayed him being more jokey instead of being wise, like how we would in season 1, with a bit of a mix between funny and serious at times. But in season 2, they did a serious, jokey guy. Now, let's kill him off. All right. Good job.
With Heimerdinger's character in season 1. I hate spin.
Why pay over $2,000 to create an ebook when this $27 AI does it all?
Spin the wheel, and my only redeeming memory of it is when I watched season 2 with one of my friends. She thought it was Ed Sheeran singing. One of Heimerdinger's key flaws was his neglect of the Undercity and passive acceptance of the status quo, to the point that he's shown in episode 5 of season 1 happily singing with his eyes closed as Jace perpetuates government corruption. The point is clear that his closed-mindedness and fear of change, even if justified in some aspects, made him careless and inactive. Although I like the message of this song in isolation, it takes on a more cynical meaning when coming from Heimerdinger, the character who was infamously unproductive when it came to addressing societal issues. Heimerdinger eventually does decide to be an active character and help Echo, although this isn't delivered in a compelling way and is essentially caused by Echo saying, "Pretty please." He has a fairly rushed self-sacrifice that isn't helped by knowing in League of Legends lore, Yordles can't die, and he's gone. You would imagine Heimerdinger would have an important role to play in the Zon and Piltover War, and would go on an engaging journey to make amends for his past mistakes, as well as struggle to maintain hope in the midst of seemingly impossible circumstances. But instead, he's portrayed as detached from reality and ambivalent to the suffering of the people he cares about. Heimer truly has dinged his last dong, and it's disappointing to see his once complex character be reduced to a wacky scientist.
Gotta go with my girl Pow Pow. You know, we miss you. To come home, the kids miss you. No, please, please come home.
Since season 2 dropped, Echo finally got his moment in the sun, and his fan base has grown exponentially. Noticeably, a lot of the Echo hype I see online is connected to Time Bomb in some way, the ship name for Echo and Powder for the few normal people still watching this video. It's going to be hard to talk about Echo's character in season 2 without walking into the minefield that is shipping, since most of his character beats are tied to Jinx, so I'm gonna say it. Time Bomb was a net negative for Echo's character. It's a huge case of a potentially interesting concept being horribly rushed and a waste of time for Echo in a very crowded season. As I said in my analysis of Echo in the prior season, his shining moment involved him wrestling with a difficult moral choice. His compassion prevented him from doing something that he had convinced himself was necessary, and that may well have prevented the escalation of conflict between Topside and the Undercity. I was so excited to see how Echo would handle full-on acts of war from Piltover, and whether or not he would be able to maintain his principles and lead the Firelights to prosperity or crumble under the pressure. But the writers decided that would be a boring direction for his character, I guess, and removed him from the Firelights to go on a side quest in another dimension. Echo isn't given anything interesting to do for much of episode 7, nothing that reveals anything new about his character. He quickly resolves he has to get back to his home dimension to help the people he cares about, and he spends most of his time doing that. Well, except for the scenes where he's embarrassingly bad at blending in and dissuading any suspicion that he might not be the Echo this universe knows.
Didn't think I'd miss
Alright, I'm back. Some internet trouble there, so let's hope I can finish this video before my internet cuts out a second time.
Any resentment towards Jinx for perpetuating the kind of senseless violence the Firelights are against. Anyway, time for the time bomb prom dance. So cute, so fun, j'aime le français. This sequence may be beautiful, but once we get to Echo and Powder's conversation on the balcony, all of the issues I have with how their relationship develops and what it means for Echo rear their ugly heads. Echo thanks Powder, explaining that he used to dream the Undercity could be like this, but he got so focused on the fact that it wasn't that he gave up on it, and especially gave up on her. I like to consider myself a mature adult who doesn't place too much emotional investment in cartoons, but I did seriously crash out at this moment, if you consider angrily pausing the episode and quietly ranting to yourself so that your parents don't hear you to be a crash out. Echo was the one character who did not give up on the Undercity, despite also losing a parental figure in a horrific way like Vi.
Yep, I agree on that. Echo didn't give up. He stayed to his goals from season 1.
In Jinx, he overcame his personal struggles and founded the only benevolent faction of Zaun, fighting back against Silco's Shimmer Empire and sheltering people caught in the crossfires. On the issue of Jinx, it's strange to argue that he gave up on her when all of his experiences with her would only support the conclusion she was irredeemably violent. Every encounter they had ended with her slaughtering his friends in a state of disassociated apathy. Even then, he couldn't finish her off because deep down, there was a part of him that still believed in her humanity. This is a horrible interpretation of his character and a stain on his memory, no matter how cute Time Bomb may be. Anyway, Echo is no longer the leader of the Firelights and is just Jinx's boyfriend, I guess. He returns to his home dimension, somehow finds out that Jinx is going to blow herself up in her air hangar, and somehow convinces her and the Firelights to work together to stop Victor from taking over the world. He gets 0 lines from that point on. The writers leave any interesting material on the table, never exploring how Echo reconciles his newfound affection for Powder with their tragic history in his dimension. You know, maybe that's for the best, because the more you think about the whole I fell in love with an alternate universe version of you while piloting the body of me in that universe like a meat puppet, the creepier it gets. Echo's character is horribly wasted in this season. The writers seem to misunderstand.
Yep, I agree on that one, because he was just like Jace. Jace, Mel, and Echo, and Heimerdinger, those 4 characters were shafted in season 2. Like, their motivations weren't the same. They weren't into season as much. They were given less screen time than everybody else. Like, out of all the characters, it was Echo and Mel. Those 2 were wasted because they were both gone for most of the season, and they just come back like at the near end of it.
Understand that it wasn't his cool powers or riz that made him a likable hero, but how he grappled with the weight of being a leader and the difficult judgment calls that come with that. I would throw Time Bomb in the trash any day if it meant we would get the chance to explore how Echo adapts to increasing tensions between Piltover and Zaun. His heroic moments in season 2 are little more than flashy spectacle, rather than exploring how he maintains or changes his beliefs to best protect his community.
Get your tickets right now before they're gone. Click here or go to comedyevent.bm.
I'm gonna hate this, aren't I?
I never thought Savika and Echo would have something in common, but she's also a key political player in Zaun who had the foundations for an interesting journey this season, only to not do any cool political things and instead become an accessory to Jinx. Insert Dr. Doofenshmirtz Nichols. Like Echo, Savika's best moment in season 1 was her making the difficult choice to remain loyal to Silco and the cause of Zaun instead of taking an easy power grab. Those were essentially the few attributes of her character that the show communicated to us with her limited screen time. She wants to achieve Zaunite independence at all costs, she is loyal to Silco as an extension of this, and she does not like Jinx because she is a hindrance to this goal. If Savika knew that Jinx killed Silco and destroyed the peace treaty by blowing up the council, it would be game over for Jinx. So cynically, I think the writers purposefully leave this vague in the hopes that the audience will forget about this issue. Even her insistence to Smeech that we don't hand over our people is unsupported by everything we've seen of her character. She lost her respect for Vander because he wasn't willing to turn anyone in to get enforcers off the streets. traits. Savika and Jinx's newfound partnership, despite having potential, is poorly developed. Instead of confronting any of the personal flaws that prevented them from understanding each other in season 1, they trauma bond over Silco. Even this explanation for their newfound connection is strange, considering that they had very different relationships with Silco as individuals, with Savika being almost a co-leader of Zaun on equal footing to Silco, and Jinx being part of a toxic father-daughter dynamic. As with many characters this season, Savika suffers from time skip syndrome and inexplicably becomes Jinx's guard dog, despite her antics doing nothing but harm to Zaun and worsening the invasion. She went to a Zaun therapist off screen, I guess, and now she's let go of her hatred for Jinx and shares Silco's belief in her potential. In a way, it doesn't seem like the poor woman has a choice whether or not she supports Jinx. Despite being Silco's right hand, no ableism intended, she only manages to rally Zaun together because they want to see Jinx. Savika then seemingly doesn't consider the possibility that they would be caught holding a rally at a recognizable statue of a longtime revolutionary leader of Zaun, and fails to save anyone from Rictus's men. She saves Isha from Warwick, and then guess what? No more lines for you! Savika was poorly used at every turn in season 2. When she is involved in the story, her character has been morphed to fit the needs of the plot without an engaging demonstration of how or why her beliefs have changed. So many potentially cool moments to see how she fills the hole Silco left behind, like convincing the different factions of Zaun to rally together, organizing a group of Zaunites to join the battle against Ambessa and Victor, or accepting a seat on the council, go completely unexplored. Who's the funny-looking rat now? I don't even know what that means. We're almost done, aren't we?
Mel or Victor?
You can't choose between your children.
Time to talk about big muscle mommy Bessa. Ambessa, who was once a charismatic antagonist and genuine counter-argument to Mel's diplomacy, becomes a comical and downright stupid supervillain by the end of the show. Any interesting nuances to her character are quickly flattened out. It makes sense that Ambessa and Singe get along so well, because he will also commit crimes against humanity and then half-heartedly say, "It's for love." She quickly loses any modicum of restraint or strategy when it comes to her method of securing power through intimidation, and her descent into madness is frantic and absurd rather than a thought-provoking commentary on the never-ending nature of the quest for power. Ambessa's goals are poorly defined beyond stopping the Black Rose, and she's bafflingly incompetent when it comes to trying to accomplish this. Season 1 gave no indication that she was interested in taking over Piltover. She simply wanted Mel to refine Hextech weapons through a war between Topside and the Undercity, then take these weapons back home to defend her family from further Black Rose attacks. It makes sense for her to stoke the flames of warfare between the two cities by exploiting Salo's grief, but it confuses me why she pays no mind to Jace and Victor, who are, you know, pretty crucial players in the whole Hextech thing. Funnily enough, episode 4 shows Ambessa mercilessly vaporizing one unwitting scientist after the other in an attempt to crack Hextech, seemingly behind Caitlyn and all of Piltover's back. Even with Jace's blueprints, various Hextech weapons to use as prototypes, and an entire city of scientists at her disposal, she can't make even one Hextech weapon, I guess. If there are no Hextech weapons to test, why is she still so involved in the hunt for Jinx? Why does she trust Victor at all not to enslave her and her family in his hive mind once the battle is over? Is she really trying to conquer all of Piltover just because Caitlyn got Rictus killed? Or is this an extension of the whole evil god Victor alliance? Neither option is a good look for either of their characters. Ironically, from what we're shown in season 2, Ambessa should be good when it comes to the Black Rose as long as she has her runes. I mean, a Hextech gun isn't going to do much when the witches can summon a bunch of spooky thorns and kidnap you from anywhere. Ambessa's pretty much a tank on her own, and if she could get her and her army a bunch of runes, that'd be plenty to take out the Black Rose. But no, decimating Piltover and creating an undead army that doesn't even seem all that effective at fighting is necessary to protect her family from some witches, I guess. Everything that made Ambessa engaging in the past season is quickly replaced with a caricature of a warlord. She's not an effective strategist, her psychotic actions take her once cruel yet grounded perspective to a ridiculous and uninteresting level, and her relationship with Mel is poorly written. In a way, shoehorning Ambessa into the world-dominating villain role makes her less threatening. The carefully written layers to her character in season 1 humanized her enough that you wondered if she could be reasoned with, and you could understand why Mel is so torn between hating her mother's cruelty and still wanting a relationship with her. But there's no emotional nuance to her death when she's been rushed from wanting to protect her family at all costs to wanting to could take over the world. And as with so many aspects of this season, all I can wonder is what could have been if the writers simply complaining, and I don't mean to be patronizing. Arcane Season 2 has enough artistry that I can understand why many people still enjoy it. As I said all the way back in the beginning of this video, I didn't hate it on my first watch either. Through engaging with online discussion and even sharing it with real life friends, which I have, I gained a better understanding of even the smallest details of the show. But unlike Season 1, which encouraged viewers to watch carefully to enhance their enjoyment, watching Season 2 with any level of scrutiny only causes it to fall apart. Whenever people debate about Arcane, the defense of Season 2 tends to boil down to, you need to be a smarter viewer and not expect the writers to spoon-feed everything to you. In fairness, one of the major reasons Season 1 was a breath of fresh air was because the writers employed subtext and trusted the audience to put the pieces together. The issue with Season 2 is that we've been given a puzzle with malformed pieces that you have to smash together, or with pieces entirely missing. Look, I know these are desperate times, but are we unironically using the Rick and Morty defense? While this may not be the intention, this sort of counter-argument comes off as pretentious, and especially frustrates me because Arcane Season 1 is something anyone can enjoy thanks to how well it explores its characters. Ever since I started watching idol anime in 7th grade, my taste in media has been irreparably damaged. So I understand if most people think a show that I love with all my heart is weird and stupid. And yet, I'm surprised by how many people I know love Arcane, and I think it's thanks to the fact that it's just well written. Season 1 of Arcane was a perfect combination of having a low barrier to entry while still having a lot of high concept moments and more experimental forms of storytelling. It proved that animated shows didn't need perfect scores with test audiences to be profitable and popular. Implying that you need to be smarter to appreciate the greatness of Season 2 is strange, not only because paying more attention to Season 2 actually reveals more of its flaws, but mainly because it unnecessarily gatekeeps a show that encourages people to try something new, outside of the general audience's standard. There's a sick, twisted, depraved part of me that loves to dissect Season 2 like a mutilated corpse. But why does anyone commit acts others deem unspeakable? For love. Maybe Singed and I aren't so different after all. Arcane will always be a special show for me, especially the memories I have with Season 1, and even though Season 2 didn't live up to my expectations, it has beautiful moments in isolation, and is, in some ways, entertaining with its absurdity. Still, I don't want to leave you with the impression these League of Legends spin-off shows are a lost cause. I genuinely hope the writers are being honest when they say this was how they wanted to end things, and weren't cheated out of the story they wanted to tell by corporate meddling. But I hope they can learn from the fanbase's frustration with Season 2 and further improve when it comes to future projects. Thank you for watching my first attempt at a pretentious video essay, and I'll see you all next time. Bye! A shimmer fire is set off in Singed lab. In a shimmer fire is set off in Singed's lab. You know what? We're just gonna go with the original pronunciation. Jason Victor's Jason Victor's heck gates. She notices a fire at a tent, heading to get a closer look before it promptly explodes. A closer look? He tells her he never would have given her to topside and says, "Don't cry, you're perfect." That was maybe the worst one. It sounded like Jennifer Coolidge. "Don't cry, you're perfect." Vi tries to tell Powder that everything will be okay. That was really horrible reading. My favorite thing about Heimerdinger in Season 1 is how in the span of one scene, he can go from, "Oh, Fizz Wizard, what?" Let's try again. And Mbessa meet to discuss the memorial attack, with Mel proposing attack. We get a montage of Victor doing Scarlet Witch hands on Wander. She returns to her air hangar, preparing to blow herself up, but Echo intervenes just in time. Echo interrupts her! Am I interrupting? It's back! And Mbessa collapses into Mel's arms, telling her, "You are the wolf," before passing away. I read that like, "You are the Banana King." Go unexplored in favor of a philosophical. It sounds like a wicked word that they would make up. You would imagine Heimerdinger would have an important role to play in the Zahn and Piltover War, and would go on and engage. Oh my gosh. The Christian Link Demon is trying to stop me from recording this video, but I'm almost done!
Okay, so that concludes that video. Very good points for each character involved. No, I didn't really give them much commentary because it was so good. There's really not much really to comment on except certain characters that I was more invested in, like Jinx, Mel, Echo, and Abessa. Overall, that was a very well done video. If you want to see the original video that I looked at, it's in the comment section. It's in the description of this video. And you'd like to see more videos like this, you can leave some in the comment section down below. And until next time, have a nice one. All right, now, this video was very insightful. It really wants me to go back and rewatch Arcane myself and just look at these plot points. But I'm not sure if I want to. If I do, it'll probably be just season 1. And I'll just leave season 2 by itself. Because season 1's so good, I don't really want to ruin the good part of it and analyze season 1 instead. But I could see this video made some very good points for season 1 and season 2. Season 1, despite its good performance, there are some bits and pieces that weren't as well executed from her analysis on each character. But I do agree, in season 2, most not all the characters went right off the window, making them very, very different. I had to give this video, I would give it a score out of 10. I would have to give this one a solid 7. No, I'll give it a solid 8. 8 out of 10 in terms of my enjoyment for the video, because most of it I wasn't really commentating on it. I was really just listening to it. It was that well edited and detailed. But overall, that's it for this video. If you like it, you could give it a like, comment, and subscribe. And until my next video, have a nice one.